Okay. Unfortunately, our voices are not going to be amplified. Again, we tried to do the best we could to get as many people to this meeting as we could by different media. So currently, as you can see, most of you, I have two mics in front of me. One is to stream for the live stream that's going to be, is now being currently played on channel 7, as well as it will be YouTube later for future viewing. And then the bigger mic in front of me is for the Zoom audience, those folks that could not make it here and are sitting, listening to it online. So like I said, we tried to get and make this as attendable as we could. That's also why we're here at this venue, because we could not have it at the town hall and be able to offer this, this variety of abilities or ways to join the meeting. So the folks in the back, can you please raise your hand if you can hear me? Oh my gosh, so all of the yelling at my kids has paid off. That is phenomenal.
Who are you?
I will do that in just a second. We're going to go through. Yeah, maybe I won't, actually.
Can we talk to your kids about that?
My name is Heidi Kroning, and I'm on the Windemere Township board. And we're going to go through introductions. We have a few guests here with us tonight. I tried to bring as many folks here as I could to answer as many questions as we could for those of you, whether you be here in the audience as well as on Zoom, to get the questions that you have answered. And for any questions that aren't answered after we leave here tonight, there'll be the ability for you to get questions answered and have follow-up conversations. So I don't want you to think this is it. This is the beginning, and I want to, again, make it clear. This is an informational meeting. This is not a decision-making meeting. It's just for you to understand and learn about the permit that the township was required to issue, as well as the project that has been put in front of the township. I'm going to let Tony Bacchiari, who's also on the town board, introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Tony Bacchiari. I'm one of the board supervisors. So we're glad that you guys are over here. We just want to make sure that the questions are purposeful, and please be cordial. If there's no sense of,
They can't hear you, Tony. You're going to have to really project. They
It's
cannot
muddy.
hear you at all.
Seriously.
Yep, use your mom voice.
I'll make it short. My name is Tony Bacchiari. I'm one of the board supervisors.
I'm going to let Dennis Generu next introduce himself. He's our zoning administrator.
If I stand up, Ron, will this still pick up or no? Maybe?
Unless you hold it up.
Is that better? All right, my name's Dennis Generu. I am the zoning administrator currently. I do that part-time for the township. I've been doing that since about May of last year. So I have the responsibility of making sure that any permit requests or anything that comes under the jurisdiction of the township's ordinance is addressed in a proper way. I have Heidi Kronig as the person that I directly report to in that capacity, and I also have access to Kevin Hofstad, who's an attorney that represents us on certain issues, so I don't hesitate to use them. I also have the Planning Commission that meets 3 to 4 times regularly each year that I work with to address things like the comprehensive plan, updates to the ordinance, and different things like that. So, a little background on me: I grew up in Barnum, Minnesota, played hockey in Moose Lake. I lived in Cromwell for 20 years. I farmed there. I moved here in 2018. I live on Sturgeon Lake. I quit farming and I don't coach anymore, so I thought this would be fun to do, and here I am. But I try my very best to honor what's in the ordinance. That's always been my goal. I work in county government right now for a neighboring county, and I'm going to do my very best to answer your questions tonight. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, and I'll explain that to you briefly. Last thing, I do have to drive to Washington, D.C. and be there by 6 o'clock tomorrow night to pick 2 kids up, otherwise they're going to be on the street. They're done with school. So I do have to leave at 7:30 tonight. I do apologize for that. I will, I think, kind of go first with some of the stuff and do my very best to answer as many questions as I can for you. Thank you.
Were they able to hear that on Zoom?
They said they could, yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So where I'm going to move next, and then after, again, the introductions, I'm going to go over the meeting norms and expectations. So Byron, if you're gonna need to speak into that mic and speak pretty loud. And then we'll just go right on down the line as to who's here and what your role is.
So my name's Byron Custer, and I'm the chairperson of the Moose Lake Windemere Sanitary Sewer District. We would be the service provider. We are in the area where this resort is located.
I'm Bruce Laurie, I'm one of the sewer board members, came here just to represent the sewer district.
I'm Matt Bolf with SCH. I currently serve as the City of Moose Lake's city engineer, and here in case there's questions about our treatment ponds and capacity.
And I'm Phil Etner with the City of Moose Lake. I'm their Public Works Superintendent. And I'm here because I was asked to be here with Matt, so.
Was everyone able to hear them?
Yep.
Excellent. And then also at the table here, we have Ron Mossberg. He is our treasurer, audiovisual, and has been a godsend in helping us set this up, as well as Tony, who was able to get the venue. And we also have our amazing clerk, Cindy, who has really helped me get this organized, so much appreciation to all of them for helping us pull this off. Before we begin the presentations, again, how this will work, or in theory how this is going to work, is there was an agenda up front, and we're going to do presentations, and then we'll do Q&A, questions and answers. Any question and answers, I will make sure and get you directed up to the podium, and you need to speak loudly, say your name, and state your question. Your question needs to be, if you can, brief. And also pay attention, because what I'm going to need to really be concise about is not repetitive questions, having different people come up asking the same questions. So that's going to be really key, so we can make sure and get as many different questions as we can answered and filtered through. The other thing that's really important, again, like with me, is speaking loudly so everyone can hear, because the worst thing is when you finish a meeting and you think you did a really good job, and then you go, well, we didn't hear any of that. So for sure, because this is very important, I want to make sure everyone can hear, and that those that are on Zoom or listening, that, you know, from their homes or whatever, can really get a good idea and really hear what's going on. I also want to really call out respectfulness. We really need to be quiet, not have a lot of back talk. If there's something that you hear that you disagree with or that upsets you, if you can please just keep it to yourself and keep quiet and just keep listening and be respectful and no yelling. That's the expectations for tonight. I know this is a very emotional topic for many of you, and I absolutely understand that. But we just are here. I have to keep it to the facts with as many people that are here as well as many people that are listening. So if you can, please keep an open mind and be respectful. Again, the logistics are, we do have refreshments up here if you get hungry or thirsty. And if you need to use the bathroom or the water fountain, it's just outside these doors, or if you want to go through the back door and then come around, they're just down the hallway off to your left. Did I miss anything about the logistics or about anything? For the Zoom participants, this is also key. There will be no messaging that's allowed between yourselves. The only messages that are sent will go to our moderator, Ron Mossberg. And the two things that we are looking for is, if you honestly can't hear, we would love to hear that, as well as your questions. Again, keep them succinct, and we'll try to get to as many as we can, if not all of them. For those of you that actually sent in questions ahead of time, thank you so much for doing that. The goal is for the presentation, I'm hoping to cover a lot of those questions. For the questions that didn't get answered during both presentations, and what I mean by the presentations, I mean by the developer, Mark Lampert, or by our zoning administrator, Dnr Regulations, we'll make sure and follow up with those questions. So what I did with those questions that you submitted is I sent them to the developer as well as to the zoning administrator, so they could tailor their presentation to get at those questions. They may not hit them all, but that was the goal with you submitting them, so we could be well prepared for tonight. So, I'm hoping I covered everything. All right, so what we're going to start off with now for the next 15 or 20 minutes ago, and these are rough estimates, is we're going to have Mark come up and do a presentation in regards to his projected project. Mark?
Sure.
And you can introduce yourself as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Heidi. You did an amazing job with the introductions, and thanks for all the city officials that are here, county officials, townships, DNR, everybody that's here. So, well attended, and I'm absolutely thrilled that everybody's here. I think there's nothing like information, nothing like being able to get the information out. I know that there's been a lot of things that have been out there chattering, and I really hope tonight we can kind of clear everything up so everybody can understand the direction that we're taking here. So,
Okay, hold on one second. Ron, are they able to hear that? Because I want to make sure you're close and you're doing good.
I'm checking on that.
Okay,
Yes, we can hear.
excellent.
Yes,
Thank you
we
so
can
much.
hear.
Sorry
That's
about that.
terrific. And hello to the Zoom audience. Happy to see them as well. Mark Lambert, Summit Management. I've lived on, been part of Sand Lake for a long time. We actually bought our cabin here in 1995. And so I live not very far from the resort. The story of the resort was after living at our cabin for 7 years, the resort came for sale. It was a terrible, terrible wreck. I don't know if any of you were around in 2005, but when I purchased the resort, I showed up the first weekend and met the owner. The owner showed up, collected the rent from the new people coming in, did a little broom work, and then left for the week. And the biggest complaint that I had for our first week of ownership was that we didn't allow him to do drugs on the property. So that was 17 years ago, December 1st of 2005. And so I am very proud to tell you that for the last 17, soon to be 18 seasons, you haven't known me, you probably haven't known what we do other than maybe an occasional passing of the patio or something like that. And so I guess I'm just proud of my team, I'm proud of our management, that we've done a really good job of running that operation, and I hope you guys think the same thing. So with that said, we have 21, make sure I get this right, we have 21 structures, we have 25 units, we have 56 bedrooms in our current operation. So giving you a sense of where we are, our proposal has one structure, 49 units, 82 bedrooms. So we'll have a gain of about 26 bedrooms. So as you start to size it, I know that it feels like a lot when you see that 49 number, but the reality of it is it's a 26 bedroom gain. And we have done some studies. We looked at a larger footprint, we looked at more units, ultimately decided with the market, with the requirements, that we would try to scale it back to the 49 units. And we're, I think, pretty proud, and you'll see that tonight, of what we've put together. Right now, I guess the best thing that you could call us would be an extended stay resort. We have dailies, we have weeklies, we have monthlies, and frankly, I've got some yearlies. And so we try to cater to the market up here. Within the first year or two I bought it, I kept all my cabins open, and I kept waiting for the snowmobilers to show up. And I about died from September until December, when there was one snowfall. And then there was no more snowfalls after December until May. And I quickly decided that the world of resort management needed to have weekly and monthlies, because it really gets pretty quiet on the lake during those off months. And so with that said, we have what I would call an extended stay resort, and that's what we're looking to continue to do up there. Our resort is a good resort. I'm proud of it. There isn't a bed in that place that I wouldn't sleep in personally, because that's our standard. On the other hand, it's getting older and it's getting tired. And so as part of, frankly, our vision, my vision, I'd like to replace it, and I'd like to replace it with something really, really nice. And so you'll find out tonight, we'll have Tessa Shaplinski, our marketing person, kind of give you a background of who we are and what we've done. We're pleased to have Mr. Galette from the Stinson Law Firm here to kind of talk a little bit about how we've gotten to where we are. We have Art Bartels here tonight to spend a little bit of time with you. Art is a tremendous, tremendous architect, designer, site planner, land use planner that did our Bluestone project. And if you've been up in Bluestone and seen the tavern, seen the lofts, flats, views, any of those, that was Art's creation. And so I guess I thought the best thing that I could do for the community and for the property and for what we have here is to bring the best guy that I knew to task to try to put together something. And hopefully as you make the presentation tonight, you'll see that. The vision that we've got a terrific location. I understand the channel issue, but frankly, we are on the highway. And that's a little less desirable of a location if you wanted to have your cabin there. But if you're going to have a multifamily building, it's a pretty good location for that. Not only are we on the highway, we have a service road that was specifically built for the resort back in the day. What we're looking to do is we want a real high amenity, high service facility. So we're looking for, biggest for me, were underground parking. So I know there's some discussion that it's a 4-story building. It's not a 4-story building, it's a 3-story building with underground parking. And we've been able to get one space per stall underneath there, so there'll be a stall for everybody in the building. Important for us is an elevator. And we want an elevator from that bottom parking garage, so when you pull in the snowstorm, you can go up to the 3rd floor, you can have a unit. We've done an indoor pool, a hot tub, a sauna, game room, community room, exercise room, all the same amenities that we've done in our Bluestone properties. I expect we'll have a concierge, which is kind of a hotel-style amenity that we found is just a nice touch, somebody that can kind of reach out and give the service level that people who live in that building want to have. I've explained, and we'll go into a little more detail probably during question and answer, but my intent is to have a boat club. Our intent is not to have the guests or residents bringing their own boats. We have approximately 25 slips. We're not intending to change that. We're not proposing 49 slips. We're proposing to have a boat club. If you want to use a boat at the facility, you will have to use ours. We have the ability to control that. We have the ability to put rules in place that says it's our boats only. Obviously, we can't stop the right-of-way, or the boat landing, that's people coming and going, but we sure can stop who comes onto our docks and our lifts, and that's what I plan to do. Our target market, frankly, is the higher-end folks, retirees, people that want a really nice place to stay. And some of those will be weekly, some of those will be daily. Frankly, I guess if we can figure a way to do it, I'd like most of them to be longer. I think it's a beautiful place. I think that longer stay people are better. I run the resort, right? And we don't need folks that come for a day with 3 boats and 25 people camp for the weekend and go. Those are the ones that I think put the heavy stress on the lake. My goal is smaller units, higher end units with people that are gonna be here long time. And as you know, and I'm guessing I'm not singing to the choir, the longer you're on the lake, the less you use it. And I think we probably all know that. If we're there and we get a couple of weeks or a couple of days during the year, I've certainly found that to be the case with us, so we just don't use it as much. I intend to maintain the ownership. Frankly, we build and we hold. This is not a condo project. This is not something that's for sale. This is something that we will build, be very proud of, continue to manage. Frankly, if we can find a way to do it, I'd like to live there someday. And so it'll be done first class so that perhaps the owners inside living there and can continue to be part of the program. Most importantly, when you look at what a resort could look like, we are not intending to build a restaurant or a bar. I don't want bar traffic, I don't want people coming down. We do have the golf course, we're blessed to have the golf course taking care of us over there. So we are not including a restaurant or bar in our plans. A couple final things, it's not a marina. We will continue to have the docks and slip docks that we have. We're not gonna sell gas, we're not making it into a big marina, we're not making it into a big production. Lastly, I guess I just want to say we're here and we're listening. I'm excited to have everybody come here tonight. I'm excited to have everybody here and share their ideas and thoughts. This is a community project, and so it's going to take some listening. We're going to have some evolution and some things to do. We've just started the process, and we know that. And it's going to be a continual discussion to get to where we finally are. But if we do it right, I think we can have an amazing asset for us, for the community, and for something going forward. And so as we go through tonight, I just want to assure you that I'm listening, that we're listening, and that we'll continue to try to evolve this to make this even better as we go through the process. So with that said, I guess what I'm going to do is pass it on to Tessa Shaplinski. She's our marketing director, and she's just got a quick 4 or 5 slides of what we've done so far. So I don't know if you can grab her or put her on.
Great.
Tessa, your go.
Although we can't hear you, Tess. Test me, try again. If that doesn't
Good
work.
evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, we can now, thank you. My bad, speaker problem.
No worries. Next slide, please. We are Summit Management, and our mission is to create communities with the best possible living environment for our residents. Summit Management takes pride in providing positive professional management for your home. We design, develop, and manage all of our communities. Next slide, please. A little bit more about Summit Management. We are located in Minnesota and have communities all over the state, ranging from luxury housing, student apartments, commercial property, a resort, and mobile home communities. From design, development, and management, we do not sell our communities. Next slide, please. Our most recent development is Bluestone and Duluth. This project was approved in 2011 and completed in 2021. This community has 435 apartment homes, along with 14 shops and the Tavern on the Hill restaurant. Bluestone was master planned by Art Bartels and ESG Architects. It is a first-class development. Again, we build to own and manage, and we do not sell our communities. Next slide, please. We are highlighting our Bluestone neighborhood to show you the sense of community we develop and what we hope to achieve at Sand Lake Resort with the same level. Next slide, please. I would now like to introduce Eric Galette from the Stinson Group, who worked extensively to review the legal background for us.
Thank you, Tessia. Can you see me or just hear me? I think you could just hear me.
Just audio tonight.
All right, so you're fortunate for that, though. Mark did have me shave and put on some clean clothes for all of you. But I'm Eric Galette. I'm an attorney at Stinson LLC. I represent Mark's company, DSLR LLC, the owners of the current Sand Lake Resort and proposed developers of the new one. Mark asked us in April 2021 to get involved in this project to give some advice about the development process generally, but most specifically the land use approvals required for the project. And Mark asked me to come tonight and explain the advice I gave him and the zoning process that we've been through. First, let me say, we also have, as Heidi reported, she's shared the questions you all asked, and we're going to try to address those as best we can in our presentation. Of course, we'll talk and answer questions afterwards if we haven't hit everything. But I understand one of the main questions is, why are you only hearing from us for the first time tonight? We're happy to have that opportunity tonight, and we have not had an opportunity to present earlier for the simple reason that the project is a permitted use under both the Windemere Township zoning ordinance and the Pine County zoning and shoreland ordinances, both of which have been reviewed and approved by the DNR as being consistent with their model ordinance and their rules. By definition, a permitted use is not subject to public review and hearing. It's only subject to administrative review by the zoning administrator of the township, and only for purposes of confirming conformance with technical requirements of the zoning ordinance, such as setbacks, height, density, stormwater management. We nevertheless understand the public interest in this project, and as I said, we're very happy to have the opportunity to present it tonight. Next slide, please. Before we get into discussing why the resort itself is a permitted use and if we're not subject to public hearing, first thing we needed to advise DSLR about is what kinds of approvals are required to obtain, and because Windemere is a township subject to rules from the Pine County, we need to determine who controlled in the first place, whether we needed permits from the township or the county. Under Minnesota statutes, every Minnesota township has authority to create and enforce its own zoning ordinances, but under those same statutes, the township ordinance cannot be less strict than the county ordinance. And if any provision of a county ordinance is more strict than the township ordinance, the township is required to apply the county rule. I cannot attest to the degree to which the county reviewed this application, but I do know the county's aware of it and essentially acquiesced to the township's control and regulation of the project. Next slide, please. There are three basic factors that control land use of a waterfront development. First is the water body classification. The DNR has several different classifications of lakes and rivers and other bodies of water, all based on the department's determination of the degree of development that's appropriate and the level of activity that's appropriate for the particular water body. At the township and county level, there's regulation on the basis of zoning district. County and township divide up the township into different districts based on allowable uses within a geographic area. And then the third factor is use classification. Each zoning district identifies which uses are allowed, and then there are specific regulations applicable to each use. Next slide, please. Sand Lake is a recreational development lake classified by the DNR, recognized by Pine County and Windemere Township. The residential uses, recreational, commercial uses related to water-based activities are what are allowed in and around the lake. And next slide. Sand Lake Resort site itself is in a S1 shoreland water-oriented commercial residential district as classified by the township. The county classifies it as a water-oriented commercial district. They use different terms, but they use different initials, and they are otherwise essentially allow the same sorts of uses: residential, lodging, resorts, restaurants, marinas. Next slide, please. The proposed use of the resort itself is described in the township ordinance as a surface water-oriented commercial use. And this is a direct quote from the ordinance. It's the use of land for commercial purposes where access to and use of the surface water feature is an integral part of the normal conductance of business. And they include resorts in their examples of water-oriented commercial uses. The county has a definition of resort itself as a commercial development that provides facilities for relaxation and recreation, typically consisting of lodges or rooms for rent. I underline those because that's all we're providing, but they also include restaurants in that definition. Next slide, please. Once you've identified the water body, the zoning district, and the use, zoning ordinances describe the uses within the specified district and on the specified body of water as being either a permitted use or a conditional use. And once that determination is made, the process by which a project gets approved is determined. The proposed Sand Lake Resort is a permitted use in both the township S1 Shoreland District and in the county WC Water-Oriented Commercial District. And as permitted uses, they are subject to review by the zoning administrator of the township for determination that it does comply with the requirements of the ordinance. And Windemere Township has made that determination and issued its permit to DSLR LLC on June 14th, based on that determination. Next slide, please. So here are the definitions. These were cut and pasted from the first one from the township ordinance, and that's cut and pasted. You can tell by the quality of the copy. The highlighting maybe backfired a little bit. That isn't meant to blur it out. That's meant to accent it. But you'll see on the list in section 10B of permitted uses in a water-oriented commercial district on a recreational development lake, surface water-oriented commercial residential for commercial use. And thinking back to previous slides, the township's definition of that use includes resorts. So it's a permitted use under the township ordinance. Next slide, please. This is a cut from the Pine County Shoreland Ordinance. So this is let me back up a little bit. In Pine County, they actually have two separate ordinances. There's one that is just the Pine County zoning ordinance that has general requirements for wall development within the county. And then they have an overlay, that's how the planners refer to it, a separate ordinance that it provides either, additional requirements or exceptions to the county ordinance. And in this instance, it does both. It imposes stricter requirements on uses located on bodies of water. And in some instances provide some exceptions to the requirements in the county ordinance. And again, I've highlighted and maybe backfired and I only blurred the county ordinance text, but section 4.6, water-oriented commercial districts, and 4.6.2, permitted uses, they actually cover the proposed resort as a permitted use in two ways. One is as a surface water-oriented commercial use on general and recreational development lakes. Again, Sand Lake is a recreational development lake. And as a resort, they actually use the specific word resort. And other permanent buildings which provide sleeping accommodations on a transient rental basis. And that's us. We are a resort. We're providing extended stay and short-term sleeping accommodations to our customers. Next slide, please. The zoning approvals process in both the county and the township ordinances specifically require hearings only for conditional uses, variances, zoning amendments. There's no similar requirements for permitted use. Same is true in the county shoreline ordinance. Public hearings required for variances and conditional uses. No similar requirements for permitted use. Next slide. Please. I know the DNR regulations are been an issue in a lot of the questions. The DNR itself is appearing at this meeting and has expressed their objections to the project, but under the state statutes and state rules, the DNR does have jurisdiction over development along bodies of water in the state, and they exercise that jurisdiction by publishing their own model ordinance for shoreland development and requiring counties to incorporate those requirements into their ordinance. Their jurisdiction over the township is less direct, but if the county is required to comply with the Dnr regulations and the township is required to comply with the county regulations, it's got the same effect. I know for a fact by reading the county ordinance that the DNR reviewed and approved the county ordinance. I know from reviewing the Windemere ordinances that they've incorporated the same requirements with respect to notice and approvals from the DNR for uses that are subject to a conditional use permit. there's no similar requirement for permitted uses, and again, I assume the logic's pretty clear. If something's a permitted use, there's nothing to review. We're working with an ordinance that's already been reviewed and approved by the DNR. So we are entitled and I think expected to rely on the township and the county ordinances as complying with the approval granted by the DNR. That concludes my presentation. I think Mark really just wanted me to address why we're meeting tonight, why we haven't met previously, and why we should be able to rely on the permit that the township issued in June. So I'll end it there, and I'll introduce Art Bartels. I think Mark's already let you know he's an architect of high esteem, working with ESG architects and the designer of this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, right here. Yeah, again, my name is Art Bartels with ESG Architects out of Minneapolis. We work regionally and some around the country in hospitality and housing and lots of types of development. As Mark said, we work for multiple phases from the master planning to many of the implementation phases of a project with Mark up in Duluth, Bluestone Loft, that it is mixed use and had great results, and we're really pleased that he really likes to do it right. So we were happy to get the call to work again. I'm going to start with a little bit of overview just from the site basis. Up on the screen we have the overall site plan of the existing resort. Highlighted all of the buildings. I think you said 21 sleeping accommodations. There's also sheds and garages, so there's I think 27 total buildings on the site. And beneath all of those trees, a whole lot of pavement area that gets the cars and trucks back and forth to all of those properties. So the area is surrounded, and the biggest white area is the site area of about 5 acres, a little bit over 5 acres. It's in two parcels. The north roughly third there is a separate, originally was laid out as a separate parcel, but is all together. So what we're talking about is that north parcel has about 9 buildings on it, between sheds, garages, and resort buildings, cabins, such as it were. The middle area on the left, the big site area, has another 14 or so buildings between the shed, the main office, etc. And then the green area along the lake shore, I'll refer to that multiple times because that's the most sensitive area, the 75 feet that's set back from the ordinary water line. Not exactly the same as the property line, that's where the waterfront, other than last year, is probably usually at as a defined line. That area has another 4 structures, currently the cabins that are within that zone. So the plan is that all of those cabins would be removed. So that all of those 27 random in structures that have been dropped down over the years would be cleared out, as well as all the pavement except for the frontage road. You can jump to the next slide. Then, presuming a more clear slate, what we have in terms of analyzing the site is that north area is relatively flat, has a lot of nice mature trees that we'd like to save, and we've defined that as a common use zone up there along the north. Along the 75-foot shoreline setback, or the ordinary waterline setback, there are slopes that are something that need to be careful about erosion, so we're not planning on doing really any development within that 75-foot area, very, very minimal. There's an existing terrace in the middle that you may have seen, some seating areas and plantings and stairs to get access up and down from the beach. So that is in the plan. Obviously the blue arrows there that's where the best views are, right kind of at the top of the bluff there. And then the left side has a gray stripe across the frontage road that's on property as an easement back. And the intent is to keep that frontage road because it provides really good access. There were some questions came in ahead of time about highway access and traffic. That frontage road, I'm pretty sure, was put there to allow a speed zone separation between, parking level traffic and fast traffic on the highway. That highway used to handle the 35 traffic before 35 was built. I think it has a lot of capacity. The extra, what you say, Mark, 52 up to 82 bedrooms. I think you'll find there's really no significant impact to the traffic on the highway. But that access will be good. The middle zone, I'll start at the bottom. There's a sort of a red shaded zone. That area kind of naturally slopes down along the driveway towards the lake. It'll come into play when we start to develop the site. And then the center zone is relatively flat and a pretty good solid building area outside of the shoreline setback, outside of the frontage, and buffering from north and south. The next slide. So you'll see the proposed development. Again, the north area is intended to be a pretty naturalized zone. Restore the landscaping and grounds there after the buildings and pavement are all removed. Right down to the lake, that stays natural. So there's a good buffer and a lot of frontage there along the waterfront that is the existing natural tree area. Along the lake shoring green, you can follow on with the mouse if it makes any sense to you so people can kind of see what we're talking about. That's the 75-foot zone where we're not intending to do much of anything. Again, existing terraces and stairs and landscaping. The old historic stairs and sign and stone walls with the sand lake signage is there and it's intended to remain. The 4 cabins that are within that zone, like I said, will be removed, restore the landscape, and maybe put fire pits and some nice natural areas for people to gather in common space and enjoy the bluff. The darker area in the middle of that plan on the side is sort of a 1-story portion. That is the amenity clubroom kind of spaces that are kind of front up closer to that 75-foot setback. The remainder of the building, the 3-story portion of the building, has been pulled back another minimum of 45 feet to provide some breathing room, some outdoor play area on the front, more flat lawn sort of area in that zone, and to provide the ground floor units to have access to the patio and their own entrances to come and go on the ground floor. On the south side, we've taken advantage on the bottom of the plan there of that natural grade dropping down to access the lower level parking. So that kind of follows the existing grade and then dips a little bit more down at the end to tuck under and hide roughly 50% of the parking below grade. There's roughly 50 stalls down there, 49, about 49 surface plus an additional, so that meets the 2-to-1 ratio required for resort. And there's another, I think it's 7 units, parking stalls on grade for additional guests or visitors if you have that many more than that are 2-to-1, or weekend visitors or people staying longer. I think that covers that. Along the street, we'd love to save some of the existing trees. We'll work that in as possible because we do really think, one thing I said to Mark is, I'll work on this as long as we can save as many trees as possible. I've been coming up here for 30-some years through town. My family's cabin is up on, just north of Cromwell on Prairie Lake, between Cromwell and Fort Worth, so I know the area, and that's why we come up here, right? Why we live up here. You can jump to the next one. From a civil standpoint, I'm just going to speak very broadly because I'm not a civil engineer, but I know SEH has been working with Mark. He hired us just as a regulating body for this property for watershed district, etc. is the MPCA. This site and development is proposed such that after the fact, the amount of impervious, amount of runoff area is actually less than is there currently. So there is not an official requirement, but Mark has engaged them to work on, like we do in most of our projects, a best practices, and that's a technical definition. Best practices in stormwater management for treatment and for storage to take care of runoff from parking lots or building roof areas, hardscape areas. So off to the right of the building, just kind of in the corner there, is a rain garden area that's going to take surface water treatment from the parking lot areas, and there'll be a little bit on the south end due to natural grade dropping down there at the garage entrance that will be treated and then discharged. There is a sanitary storm line that runs kind of right through the middle of the site. We can be located. Mark's been working with the sanitary district sanitary sewer district here in terms of the rerouting of that. That's sort of kind of well underway in terms of design, and the number of hookups have been approved for the 49. You guys can speak to that capacity issue later, but we understand that's not an issue. There will be a new water well pumped on site, drilled on site, I should say. Mark has checked with well drillers, and they do not anticipate any issues given where we are relative to water table about running out of water with the additional resident guests on site. I think the last thing is relative to that, we will also have a tank in the lower level that handles storage capacity for a fire suppression sprinkler system. That's something that the fire marshal's been looking for. Building code requires all residential or hotel resort style structures to be fire sprinklered. So that has been worked through. We've worked with a firm out of Duluth that has done that in the past as well. We'll jump to next. These are the plans that were submitted last April, the first go around. We issued them in April. This is the architectural site plan, pretty general, but it civil talks about all the grades and things like that. This is just where the building sits and how the architectural uses function. The colored blobs you see marching down the corridor are the individual resort units, and they vary from an alcove size with a, I'll call it a very bedroom, or the hotel suite size. The orange are 1-bedroom units, the blue are 2-bedroom units, and we have a couple of 3-bedroom units for people who want to come stay, bring family, that sort of thing. Next one. This is the lower level parking, and again, it is, other than the garage entrance with the service door and an overhead door, they are fully buried below grade. Like I said, the first floor units around, most of the perimeter building will have walkout patios, so the dirt will be up at that first floor level. The only area is exposed, again, is just a very small bit at the southeast end there, where the garage comes in. We also have trash room down here to take care of trash on site to make sure that stays contained inside and doesn't disrupt the visuals or blow around outside. Electrical, utility, water service will be done here, and then probably that fire tank. We also have, even with the 49 stalls for parking, we have a fair amount of storage for equipment, kayaks, that sort of thing, so that those can be put out of sight for the winter, for weekends when they're not in use, etc. Jump to the next one. This is the first floor. It's a little bit larger than we saw last time. Labels things. Again, the residential guest unit wings are down the gold corridors on the sides, and the amenities are in the middle. We wanted to make sure we really created a kind of a high-factor resort check-in desk. You can jump to the next slide. We kind of blow up on that entry area, and this is rotated so the lake is to the middle right here. So upper left, we have the resort check-in desk, lobby. The resort offices will be on site here. Some of their laundry and service are right here. Can move to the first floor. The elevator, as Mark mentioned, goes from parking to third floor for full accessibility. So it's a full ADA compliant building. Same requirements as a hotel would have. We have a game room, we have a work from home suite for those unfortunate people on the lake that have to still work remotely if they're going to do so, or have a conference room. There's a fireplace lounge, and one of the things that I think I was suspect when we did at Bluestone, they've done it twice now, an indoor pool and spa and sauna, which does two things. It really stretches the season for the resort, and it takes a lot of pressure, I think, off of the lake shore in terms of swimming and activity people can do in fresh water or chlorinated water. They will do that indoors and in a controlled environment, which should help balance some of that pressure on the beachfront usage as well. Fitness here as well, and the purple and blue areas off to the right are kind of dropped down a little bit, so that they have a little taller ceiling. We have a nice view. You'll see that in a section. A couple minutes here. Go ahead and flip it. The second floor and third floor, we're back where lake is on the upper right. There's 18 guest rooms on the second floor here. In the middle of the, call it the knuckle there, we have kind of a specialty suite that'll have a rooftop deck. outside of that for celebrations or for bigger events to happen there. There's an overlook across from that, so it's a two-story lobby. So, a bit of a lodge feel, but not going for an old log cabin. We're going for a nice kind of a fun movie and crisp. The next floor is very, very similar. This time we're overlooking on the lakeside, and we just again have 18 rec units here. Next, the flat elevations of the building. These are generally, I don't like these because they're kind of hard to understand, but on the top is that south garage end, and we see down in the dirt there is the garage door and main door to access that for getting a bicycle in and out, etc. But the rest of the building grade is up at very close to the first floor. When we go to the bottom two elevations, these are just too long for the page, so it's broken there. The upper one is the main entry. It's got just a few units to the left side, and then when we get to the bottom, there's a longer bar to the right. Those little bays that march across are screen porches, balconies there, so that there's kind of a timber frame expression there, and a little bit to articulate the roof so it doesn't feel like a big long building.
Excuse me, can I just ask a quick question? I know, Dennis, you're only here for about 5 more minutes.
Oh.
Right, are you gonna be able to talk? Because we want to hear more about the zoning than what's in the building.
Yeah, I'm happy to do
I
that.
can pause and
Yep, you bet.
back up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sounds good. All right, you guys can all hear me here, and Ron, can they hear me on the Zoom?
Check in Zoom participants. Yes, they say they can hear you.
All right, good. So I'm going to just kind of go through very, very quickly the permit application process that we have in Windemere Township, and then address it specifically with this particular permit application. So within the township, you're probably familiar, hopefully, with the township website. It includes a zoning page. On that zoning page, it includes information regarding the township's zoning rules, and those start first and foremost with the zoning ordinance. That's included on that page. Additionally, there is the application, information regarding the planning commission, and other things like that, including the fee schedule. So most people, when they need a permit in the township, they will go to that page. If they can't navigate the page, I will get an email or I will get a phone call from them asking for help with respect to applying for an ordinance. And oftentimes they'll ask me, what do they need to do? They'll tell me a little bit about their project, and it's my job as a zoning administrator under the ordinance to assist them in understanding the ordinance. My approach to the ordinance personally is I don't care whether they do the project or not. I don't care what color their house is, I don't care how big it is, how small it is, but for what the ordinance requires me to care about. In other words, my personal preferences for colors, for sizes, for setbacks, for what they should have, all those types of things do not matter. It's my duty to enforce what is in the written ordinance only. And I try very, very hard to do that. And those of you who have worked with me, who have maybe disagreed with something I have said, what I always do is I have this with me. And I don't hesitate to open it up, turn to the page that I'm referring to, and I'll go over whatever the language is in the ordinance that we are discussing in the moment, and I will ask the individual if they understand that piece, and then ask them how do they read it. And I'll explain them how I'm reading it, and then we'll come to some terms with respect to that, right? So that's my general approach to zoning in the township. It's to understand what the rules are, understand what the needs are, and help the individuals in the township do what they need to do under the ordinance, so whatever their project is compliant. If for some reason I cannot issue a permit for the project that they want to do, I inform them what the options are with respect to requesting a conditional use permit, or getting a variance, or talking to the town board if they like about something that's in the ordinance. The other piece to keep in mind is that we do have a planning commission, and we do have a comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan was worked on for a few years back, I believe in 18 and 19. I was not part of that process. And that planning commission meets regularly in the summer to assist with any basically issues that might come up with the ordinance, to assist with understanding and finding ways to implement the comprehensive plan into the ordinance, and then to deal with any conditional use permits that may come up. There's also a board of adjustment that exists in the township, and the Board of Adjustment also has a set of duties that are defined in the ordinance. And those duties include hearing variances, as well as certain appeals in certain situations. So the Planning Commission has 5 members, the Board of Adjustment by rule has to have 3 to 5. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So that's kind of a general overlay of how zoning works, at least in my time here as a zoning administrator. Again, I started roughly the beginning of May, maybe the very end of April of 2020, or 2021, 2020. So just last year in May. Last year we issued 112 permits. This year we're over 100 already. This township typically issues between 60 and 75. So the volume has really, really increased, not just in this township, though, in talking to other zoning administrators in other places, that's happened all over the place in Minnesota. So it's not unusual. I think it's impacted by COVID to some extent, but that's what's going on. In this particular case, a permit application was submitted to Windemere Township on May 11th of 2021 by Mark Lambert, doing business as DLSR, a limited liability company. And the request was for permission to build a 49-unit resort on 4 parcels, all zoned water-oriented commercial residential on the westernmost bay of Sand Lake. The request was processed per the 2015 Windemere Township Ordinance, which is what I just held up for you, with a permit being issued for the 49-unit resort on June 14th of 2021. For those of you that are wondering if it was my decision alone to issue that, no, it was my responsibility alone to issue it, but it was not a decision I made on my own. So I understood that this project is not something that we commonly see. It's the only resort I've had to address permitting in the short time that I've been here. I typically deal with shoreline restorations, homes, garages, sheds, things like that, right? I asked when I started if I had somebody that I could directly report to, that I was responsible to on the township board. Heidi Croning is one of the 3 individuals on the board, was identified as that person that I would directly, I would have to be responsible to. Basically, she is my direct, or I'm her direct report. I report to her if I have any questions. I also asked if there is legal counsel that I can use to assist me when issues come up that I don't have an answer for. I am an attorney, a former practicing attorney. I don't practice law anymore, but I was a prosecutor for Hennepin County, a prosecutor in Olmsted County, which is Rochester, and a prosecutor in Carleton County. So I understand the law pretty well, and I know that ordinances are oftentimes based on the law, correct? So wanted to make sure that I had legal counsel to go to, because I do not make decisions regarding the legality of the ordinance per se. I'm not a practicing attorney at this time. I certainly don't practice property law. So Kevin Hofstad is that attorney that we used for that. When this came in, I contacted Heidi, so she was aware, and she was aware that this would probably be coming down the pike, and contacted Kevin Hofstad as well, and communicated multiple times with both of them, and we even did some conference calls, the 3 of us, to talk about whether or not this permit could be issued under our ordinance. So we went through the ordinance with a fine-tooth comb. My approach with respect to this was, is there anything in the ordinance that would prohibit the issuance of the permit? And if there is, I need to understand that, and I would need to explain that to Mr. Lambert, just like I do with everybody else. So my goal was not to try to make sure that the permit was issued, and it wasn't to try to not issue the permit. It was try to make sure that if I did issue a permit, that it was a permit that I could back up. That if I got challenged on it at some point in time, I could defend the decision to issue the permit. So we went through the ordinance multiple times, and at the end of the day, the decision was made that it was a permitted use under the ordinance. The attorney that presented here presented basically some of the same information, some of the same language in the ordinance, both the county and the township, that we looked at. Now, I've been asked, why was there not a public hearing on this, and why did the board not have the opportunity to weigh in on whether the permit should or should not be issued? The reason why they were not is because under the ordinance, there is no authorization for me as a zoning administrator to take a permit application and bring it before the board for approval, or bring it before the public for commentary when it's a permitted use. If it's a request for a variance, if it's a conditional use permit, that's a different case. In this particular situation, this was identified as a permitted use. It would basically be an abuse of my discretion as a zoning administrator to require anybody who applies for a permit to jump through more hoops than the ordinance requires. In other words, if you apply for a permit for a big barn and your neighbor doesn't like it, If it's a permitted use, I have to permit it. I can't force that individual filing for that permit to have to answer questions from the public or from the board as to whether or not their project should go forward. And again, unless it's something that they're requiring a variance or conditional use permit. I've read the ordinance through multiple times, line by line. I did it again last night, because I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed anything. I found no language in the ordinance that gives me any authority to, number one, ask this board to make the decision in my stead or for me, or number two, to require that I have the permit applicant answer questions from the public. Talked to other zoning administrators about that, and they've been very clear about the fact that that is an absolute no-no. That if there's a public right to a hearing, you give the public the hearing. If there's a private right to a permit without a hearing, you issue the permit. So that's what we did. With respect to the permit itself, it's issued as a permit for a resort with the understanding that Windemere Township, or understanding of Windemere Township, that the property owner shall operate the facility as a resort to include offering daily, weekly, and monthly rentals. I'm reading from the permit. This permit does not exempt the property owner from observing and honoring the duties and obligations arising from the rules and regulations of any other governmental unit, agency, commission, or board with jurisdiction over the project or any of its components. It is the duty of the property owner to be fully aware of all other local, state, or federal controls regarding this project and to ensure that the project is completed consistent with these controls. Failure to do so could result in the amendment, modification, or withdrawal of the permit. Because the project is located in a shoreland zone of public water and the general contractor or subcontractors have not been identified as of the date of the permit, the property owner must submit for the general contractor as well as any subcontractors whose work directly or indirectly impacts the shoreland, a Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Board of Soil and Water Resources landowner statement and contractor responsibility for work in wetlands or public waters form, Bowser Form 071317, once the contractor is known and prior to beginning any work. So it's a notification requirement that the DNR has, and the Bureau of Soil and Water, that basically if you're going to do any work in a shoreline, you have to fill those out. We haven't traditionally had those filled out. I've been making homeowners fill them out. It doesn't necessarily slow a project down, but the DNR has made a request that we have that. The ordinance also requires that the structure be properly sewered and that it have an improved stormwater plan, which Mr. Lambert is working on and is committed to doing those things as part of that permit. I will let you know that the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources has filed a notice of appeal challenging the issuance of the permit to the Windemere Township Board of Adjustment. Windemere Township is in the process of convening the Board of Adjustment so that it can consider the DNR's appeal request. However, there are currently only 2 members on that board, and the ordinance requires that there be a minimum of 3 with a maximum of 5. The members can only be appointed at a regular township board meeting. The regular township board meeting is currently in the next one, scheduled for January 15th. The plan is to recommend the appointment of some of the current members of the Planning Commission to the Board of Adjustment. What I did was I emailed all of the Planning Commission members that are not on the Board of Adjustment and asked them if they would be interested in serving on that. And then I will take that information that's been given to me with respect to whether they're interested, give it to Heidi Croning, Ms. Croning, as the chair of the board, and she will make that recommendation. Then that Board of Adjustment will need to meet, elect a chair, or confirm their chair and elect the vice chair, and then make sure that they have a rules of procedure in place, and then they will meet again to consider the question before them. Now, because it's under appeal, I'm limited in some of the things I can talk about. So I can't give you, say, some real specific legal responses to where I think that might go or what I think the result of that might be. That would be like a member of the court's talking about a court case that's currently pending, okay? Because if either party in this, if they don't get what they're asking for, they don't prevail in front of the Board of Adjustment, they have a right to appeal it to Minnesota District Court. So basically your local county court. So, and it's part of my responsibility, I feel, although it's not articulated in the ordinance, to make sure that we don't have any procedural gaffes as far as that Board of Adjustment is concerned. So that's the course we're taking. Throughout this process, I've consulted with our attorney on multiple times. I'm sure our treasurer will see the bills for that at some point in time, I'm guessing already. But I always say that you know, if you don't know the question, the answer to a legal question, you ask somebody who does, and that's an attorney. And I'm not a practicing attorney. I do not represent myself. Only fools do that. So I've done my very best to do diligence in that regard. There's a couple of questions that have been asked of me. And basically, I'd like to try to answer those as best I can. Some have already been answered, but basically, some of the questions include when the DNR told Mark and the board that what they were doing was illegal, why did they have to go ahead and disregard of the law? Basically, again, I'm just going to comment on the fact that under our ordinance, it was a permitted use. And so I have a responsibility to issue that permit. Now, I've been asked in some of these questions, what's the hierarchy as far as the ordinances are concerned? And my understanding, and what I've been advised, is that the township's responsibility is to the county. So we have to make sure that our ordinance is as strict or more strict than what the county's ordinance is. And then the county's responsibility is to the state of Minnesota. There's some that argue that, well, the state of Minnesota governs all. There's a statute that talks about municipalities and the state's role with respect to municipalities, and it's felt that the township does not fit into the definition of a municipality. And so the township has to go to the county. And it was felt that the county's shoreline ordinance and the township's shoreline ordinances mirrored each other. And so I had to issue the permit based on that fact. I know the DNR was saying that shouldn't have, but my responsibility is to the ordinance, and then to the township ordinance, and then the county ordinance, and I can't go further than that. So that's my response to that particular piece. The next is, what about the next phases we hear Mark has planned for the additional property? I have no information on any additional phases. I have not gotten those. If there is a request for any additional work outside of what's in the permit, that would have to go through whatever process applies to whatever the work it is that's being requested. So the ordinance, has the board thought about what will happen to property values, those types of things? I just want to say that there's a lot of work done on the comprehensive plan. There's been work for the past several months by the Planning Commission, some really good work to get that comprehensive plan basically moved into the ordinance in various places. We've identified where that can happen. They're working right now on the short-term vacation rentals. They're working on different camper issues and other pieces that we need to do. We've also identified that the ordinance, which basically, as an attorney told me recently, begins to get outdated as soon as it's passed, right, as things change. And so we work to update that ordinance every so often. It looks, from my history of reading, about like it happened possibly in '04, and then again in '09, and then again in '15. So we're looking at doing it again now. We're working with the Planning Commission on that. We're also, we've reached out to hire an attorney that area counties have used, that's very, like, one of the foremost experts when it comes to zoning law in the state of Minnesota, to help us rewrite the ordinance. So it's not something we're trying to tackle on our own, but we're trying to get a professional in here that does this for a living. When that process happens, there will be a public hearing, probably multiple public hearings with respect to the changes that are put into that ordinance. And some people have asked, how could this have happened? The ordinance, that's the process for changing the ordinance. As you go through, you propose amendments, the Planning Commission works on that along with the zoning administrator. They bring that to the town board. There's public hearings to talk about it. They take that input and they go to work on that to try to get something. They make sure that they've read the county ordinance, and they make sure that they are as strict or stricter than the county ordinance, those types of pieces. We're in the process of doing that. So those changes are happening. Somebody asked that, what was the advantage to this? Did we look at the advantage? Again, as I said before, it's not my job to determine whether it's advantageous or not. Very short story that there was, as told once, there was a fellow who wanted to paint his house a certain color, and the zoning administrator didn't like the color. And he said, you can't paint it that color here. Nobody paints their houses that color here. They're always painted this color, this color, this color. And the fellow said, where in the ordinance does it say I can't paint it this color? And the zoning guy said, well, it doesn't. Nobody else does it. I don't think you should do it. And the individual said, well, are you telling me I can't, or are you telling me you don't think I should? And I tell that story because my job is not to tell you what I think you should or shouldn't do. It's my job to tell you what you may or what you can and cannot do under the ordinance, and if there's something you can't do, where you need to go, or what you can possibly do to get a different result if you want it. So, just a couple more pieces. And I appreciate the questions. I got a lot of emails before this, sometime before this. I tried to answer every email I got or call everybody that, that had called me, tried to call them back and talk to them about it. I explained kind of the updating here. Was there an option for Windemere Township to not approve the permit until the Windemere Township ordinances were in compliance? Again, we sought legal advice throughout the process of issuing the permit, and we're in the process of updating it. And the legal advice was we had to issue that permit at the time. I can't stop projects because I feel the ordinance might be out of compliance in certain areas and say, hold on, you gotta wait a month, 2 months, 5 months, whatever it is to get your project done. Again, it's a living document. It moves with time. We get permit requests every month. I have to respond to those permit requests, issue those permits as I find things in the ordinance that seem out of whack. Then there's a process that I have to undertake to get that ordinance updated and fixed. In the meantime, I still have to issue the permits. There's nothing in the ordinance that allows me to just put the brakes on everything, say, hold on a minute, let us spend however much time we need to spend to get this fixed. So, I think that covers as much. Your questions are probably better than what I might be able to give, so if people have questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
Can I ask a procedural question? Because it's obvious.
You see, if you have a question, I need you to come up here real quick, because everyone needs to hear you. So if it's a quick question, then please step to the podium and say who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Doug Craig. And I simply wanted to know, because Dennis has to go, whether there'd be an opportunity to ask him a question. I have one.
Yes.
Okay, so I've been told by the Pine County Land Use Department, I think the gentleman's name was Blake, that the DNR had taken a look at the property and had calculated the size that they would put in there in terms of number of units based on their criteria. And the calculation they did came up with the number 9. And I simply wanted to know, are you aware, Heidi aware, was anybody on the board aware? I'm taking this second, I wasn't sitting there with the DNR, so I'm going off of what the Pine County Land Use said.
Correct. So we've spoken with the DNR. Heidi Langren is the area hydrologist that we communicate the most with. She's the one that I sent notice to as far as the matter going before the Board of Adjustment. So spoke with Heidi, spoke with Caleb Anderson as well, and we are aware of the fact that the DNR feels that the township ordinance is not compliant with what the DNR requires in this particular case. So yes, we are aware. I wasn't aware per se of the fact that they stated 9 was the amount that they could have on there. But I was aware that the DNR did not feel that our ordinance, that we should be permitting the resort. But again, I have to go to the township ordinance and into the county ordinance, and I have to stop it.
Understood. I just wanted to know if you guys were aware, and the number is 9.
Thank you. And also I want to make everyone aware, and I forgot to do this at the beginning, we do have Heidi Lindgren. She is on Zoom, so if there's any specific questions in regards to the DNR, she is also on Zoom to field some of those questions. And again, based on the time, we'll just, and Dennis, if you can stay for just a few more minutes, I think it's really important, especially during this meeting, to field a few more questions. We also have our attorney, Kevin Hofstad, is also listening in if there's any direct questions that he will need to field as well.
I'll drive fast through Ohio.
Oh, God.
I've been pulled over in Illinois and Wisconsin, but not Ohio yet.
He's making his way east.
And I apologize. I have 2 kids that go to school in Washington, D.C., and the one of them is done. So she has to move out. That's why I have to go get her. But otherwise, I did not plan to have to leave tonight. So. We had one question. Is there anybody with their hand raised, Mr. Mossberg, in regards to a question specifically for Dennis on Zoom?
So Zoom participants, through your software, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you and we will take a question from you.
Dennis, I have a question.
Why don't you hold off?
Dave,
Because you can ask that.
go ahead.
Hi, thanks everybody. I'm so concerned about the...
Can you please introduce yourself, sir?
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm David Keene. I have enjoyed my family cabin since the day I was born. I'm in the third bay, and I love everything about Sand Lake. I am curious about, you said there's only going to be 26 more people. Is that 26 more boats? Because when we go on the water, you maybe see 26 boats. And it just seems like it's going to have an effect on the, I don't know if you call it the ecosystem or what, but it seems like there's going to be an effect. I'm curious your thoughts on that, Mark.
Oh, is this a question? I was asking questions for Dennis specifically. Does anyone have a specific question for, Mark can be here for a few minutes longer, anything specifically for Dennis, the zoning administrator, in regards to Windemere? If you could please come to the podium, that would be great. And then if the rest of you on Zoom have a specific question for Dennis, we'll take one of you next.
Okay, this name.
And your name?
Sarah Jane Craig.
Okay, make sure if you can speak up so everyone can hear you. I know it's tough through your mask.
I'm sorry, I'm nervous. I don't like being
That's
nervous
okay.
by people. So on one of your slides, section 10B shoreline districts and uses allowed. Under surface water oriented commercial residential, there were 2 bullet points. For commercial use, which is permitted, and high density residential PUDs, which is conditional. And I just wondered what that is. I want to make sure that I have straight that it's something different.
Sure. So we talked about that multiple times. So the question is, why did basically we find this was a resort and not a planned use development? So we talked about that multiple times with respect to before we issued the permit with our attorney. We looked into the difference, and what we found was that the ordinance defined commercial uses to include resorts, but not residential structures like apartments, condos, that type of thing. And so based on that limited definition of what was a commercial use, and the fact that commercial uses were permitted in that area and that resorts were included as part of a commercial use, we landed on the fact that falls under the first, that it's a permitted use as a resort. The feeling was had they wanted resorts to also be defined as PUDs, they would have put that definition within that definition of what a commercial use is. So
it says high density residential, so what is it about the resort that differentiates it from high density? Is it just because it's called a resort? Because that doesn't seem quite enough.
Right, resorts being transient in nature and residences being non-transient in nature, that was the difference. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So if he starts having people live there all the time, is it a resort anymore, or is it residential, high-density residential?
Right, and what we put in there is that it has to be run as a resort. So that's in the permit, that it has to be run as a resort, as opposed to the PUD, and we did talk about that specifically when we looked at it. So.
Thank you. All right, does anyone on Zoom have a specific question for Dennis, the zoning administrator?
There are currently no hands raised on Zoom, and I messaged everybody.
Okay. Does anyone else from the audience have a specific question for Dennis General? I don't want him to walk out and then somebody think of something, and then we'll have to call him when he's driving. Does someone have a question? I don't see a hand raised.
Yeah,
If you need to come to the podium. And it gets important to keep them, if you can, succinct, so.
okay. Paula Engstrom from Sand Lake, representing a large majority of the people. We had a lot of questions put together, but I think the outstanding ones for you, Dennis, were probably around the ordinances that you need to be updating. And we know, Mark, that you have more property than just those 4 lots over there. And that you're, purchasing some other ones as well, which are all residential right now. So a couple of questions on, it sounds like because of the permits and because this was already a commercial lot, if any of the other ones go from residential to any other kind of a building or expansion project, would they be looked at differently? Would there be public review again if those change?
So are you asking if there's an effort to take property that's not zone commercial? That would require a change in the ordinance because the ordinance itself is where those zoning designations are set. And so that would be subject to public hearing. And I know there's been some public hearings with respect to whether property should be commercial or not right off the exit there of 209 in Sturgeon Lake. So that's happened in the past. I would fully expect that would happen for any efforts being made to change the way a certain portion of property is zoned. So that would be subject to public hearing.
And then follow up as far as additional phases. So this project and what we understand, the fact that it would drop down to 49 units and that the DNR, because of how things were zoned and permitted, that the DNR did not have to do the EAW, therefore they weren't engaged to do one. If another building is added on within that area, would that again be looked at individually? Or would, because the large building is already there, would the DNR get engaged then, like they should be now? Or would that cause a different change in the ordinance again?
It really depends on what they ask for and where it's at, but that's definitely something we would look at. So, as you recall, there was a public meeting. Mr. Lambert presented the possibility of a 79-unit resort, and that was subject to an EAW process. At some point in time, a decision was made to withdraw that proposal. I don't know the reasons why, but we just know that it came before us, and then we were put on notice that he was not going to pursue the 79-unit resort, and therefore the EAW went away. And there's not an EAW for a resort under 50 units. So there was no EAW process required for the particular plan that he put forward secondarily. If there's a change in the plan, we will definitely look and again talk to our legal counsel as to whether or not there is an EAW requirement if there's any effort to expand the resort. I just don't know the answer to that right now.
Okay. I have a lot of other questions, but not necessarily for Dennis.
Okay. And if you can too, and Paul, I know you did, you had several pages of them. If there's anything that Mr. Lambert didn't necessarily ask, if you can kind of keep it to, because again, I'll need to, the goal is to dismiss the meeting at 8:30. I know there's people that would stay here till 10:30, 11:30. So I just want to make sure and cover the most important ones for you. So if that's all for Dennis, I'll let you on back up here if you have questions for Mr. Lambert, if that makes sense. Or
I do. I have questions for him, for the DNR, for the sewer, and a couple others. So whenever you want me back, do you want me to sit down for?
Yeah, I just want to make sure and address your questions, and I know I talked to you beforehand. I don't know that I'll get to all your questions, Paula.
Nope, that's fine. We understand that, but we do, I mean, we want everybody to understand, especially Americans, that, people are here from generations and generations.
Yes.
And so far, all we've heard and seen is the building and the pretty parts of the building. But we have concerns about the water, the erosion, the fishing, the safety, and, I know you said you're going to try to control the boats. We can't control who brings things to a public landing. So there's a lot of the other parts about it. We've heard things about the sewer that we want to get answers on.
Absolutely.
So if we don't hear answers tonight, we will submit them. And then when we get some kind of a confirmation as to how fast we can get answers from any of the entities, we want to make sure that we get confirmation before the end of the night of how fast we can get answers.
Yeah, let's make sure and try to coordinate it, especially since everybody's here, how we can, especially for the DNR. I can't speak for her, I can't speak for Mark, I can't speak for the sewer district. So since everybody's here, I think that's an awesome idea, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being so prepared.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a specific question for Mr. Jenner? You can get up to the podium, that would be great, and introduce yourself.
Mark Brocker. My question is, it takes an act of God to cut a tree within 1,000 feet of a shoreline. and all of a sudden cutting all these trees, even though they say they're not gonna cut the trees, they are gonna cut the trees. How can that possibly have been passed that easily?
So you're right, the removal of any trees, over 3 inches in size that are not dead or dying has to be permitted under the ordinance, the way the ordinance is currently written. You got some flexibility, you cut 1/3 of the trees that are 3 inches or less measured 6 inches up, and you can cut half of the trees that are 1 inch, or less measured at 6 inches up. So the finger and wrist rule, basically, on trees.
These are huge oaks.
Right, and then when you do a construction project under the ordinance, you can remove trees, requisite to building the project if the project's permitted. The ordinance also says that. So there is an effort to keep the leaf-on condition. So it says that you can do some pruning, trimming, things like that, as long as you don't substantially change the leaf-on condition as viewed from the lake to the shoreline. So what the ordinance is trying to do, it's trying to balance the desire that people have to be able to enjoy the views, the pretty views, but at the same time keep the lakes looking as natural as you possibly can. And so it's one of those gray areas a little bit, but
It's very gray, because that's gonna change it dramatically.
right. Within that buffer zone, as he indicated, the plan would be to keep those trees up. There's no need to remove those trees. So, and if they're not dead or dying and they're not, if they're over 3 inches, he would have to get a permit to remove any of those trees because it's not where the building's going. So there's that understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your question. Is there anyone else from the audience that, or on Zoom, that has a question specifically for Mr. General?
This one back there.
Terry, if you have a question for Dennis, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
On Sun Lake, Dennis, can you comment on what the ordinance says in regards to height for this project, what that is?
Sure. So within residentially zoned areas, I believe the ordinance requires that the height be no more, and I always have to look this up because I always mix my 5s and my 8s in my head.
25 feet.
It is 25. It's 25 feet is measured from the mid-distance between the peak and the bottom of the eaves. So you take your house and you go up, measure where the eaves are, measure where the peak is, and it's halfway up there and it's 25 feet. That's in a residentially zoned. In a commercially zoned district, our ordinance is silent as to height. In a commercially zoned district, the ordinance is silent as to height.
Put that on
What it means is that the ordinance doesn't say anything about height with respect to buildings in commercially zoned areas. It does with residential areas and forest management or protected zones. But with respect to commercial zones, it does not comment on it. So.
Thank you for the question, Terry. We have one from the audience.
Hi, my name is Sandy Keene. My husband and I have had a cabin on Sand Lake since...
They can't hear you at all, Sandy, so you'll have to talk really loud.
I hate to do this. I'm sorry. I'm fully vaccinated. I've had my booster. Don't know if all of you had, but I hope to keep you all safe. Sorry for removing this. My name is Sandy Keene. My husband and I, John, have had a cabin on Sand Lake since 1974. 47 years we've been on Sand Lake. Loving it, loving it, loving it. And Mark, I hate to disagree with you, but every person that I know here who has a place on Sand Lake, people in their 80s, are down at the lake every single day. And if they're not there, they're working in their yard or their garden. So please don't assume that none of us are going to use the lake in addition to your 200 or more people that come all the time. The other thing I take offense at is the beautiful place that you are showing us, and it is very beautiful. I totally agree, it's very beautiful. What you haven't shown us is that to the left, if you're on the lake, to the left of that, there are some of us that live right there that have to put up with all of the noise that's coming from your place. If you look to the right, there are people that live right there. We live on the channel. We don't want to have 200 more people coming every day.
Do you have a specific question?
I do,
Okay.
and here it is.
Thank
I
you.
apologize.
That's okay.
And Dennis, this might not be something that you can answer at this point, but I'd like to have it in the context of this meeting. In a letter from the DNR that was dated November 18th, 2021, we read that in 1992, Windemere Township had shoreland protection to protect us from massive developments like what is being proposed for Sand Lake Resort. We also read that at some point, our township removed those protections for our shoreland, from the ordinance without notifying the DNR as was required. We would like to know when that shoreland protection disappeared and why it disappeared. That ordinance protected us. It protected all of us and our beautiful Sand Lake. 500 acres, just over 500 acres, and we have no shoreline protection. Can you find that out for us?
I will do my best.
When was that shoreline protection removed, and why was it removed?
Or was it done legally?
And was it done legally?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. Was there anyone else in the audience with a specific question for Dennis? Yes, if you could please come up.
I'm Sharon Jagosic, I live on Sand Lake.
Can everyone hear her?
Sharon Jagosic, I live on Sand Lake. My question for Dennis is, the permit that is issued, you said was for resort, a daily, weekly, monthly rental?
Correct.
Okay, when Mark was up here, he spoke about that he would like that to be longer and that he would like to live there. So, what happens if there are people that are there for a year or 6 months, or does that turn that resort into something different, or do you even know about it, or if he has people living there for a year, that's not what the permit was issued for in the first place?
Correct. So the permit reads, as I read before, that this is a permit for a resort. It is the understanding of Windemere Township that the property owner shall operate the facility as a resort to include the offering of daily, weekly, and monthly rentals. And the township would expect that that be honored. It's in the permit.
Okay, and how do you know that that's happening?
Um,
How does, he rents it for a year? Rents a unit for a year?
Well, there's an enforcement provision within the ordinance that would allow us some jurisdiction to make sure that things are happening the proper way. That is a question that I've asked the attorney that we want to hire to do, or that we're basically working out an agreement to present to the board to hire him. That's one of the things that I want him to really look at, is the enforcement piece within the ordinance with respect to all things that are permitted or conditionally permitted. And any variances as well. And Heidi and I are working with the Pine County Attorney's Office and the Pine County Sheriff's Office to put together contracts that allow us to engage in enforcement actions, not just for permitted things, but for blights and all those other pieces, because we don't have that right now. And so try to do some work on the enforcement side of things, and I don't have any teeth in what I do. So when we contract to get this ordinance rewritten, that's one of the things we'll look at. And hopefully I'll get some answers that'll allow us to be able to make sure that people honor what they say they're gonna do when they apply for a permit. And that's all I can say, because I can't venture a guess at what the future might hold. I don't want to do
I
that.
understand.
So, but I appreciate your question.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I do have one more for Dennis.
Okay, if you can come up real quick, that'd be great.
This goes to process, and we talked about the approval process, what you have to do according to the zoning ordinances, but what is going to be the response to the appeal from the DNR, as well as the letter that our attorney submitted a couple days ago, with also ordinances cited. when will those get addressed, and how will we, the public, know what happens, or what's the process?
So thank you, I appreciate the question. So as far as the appeal from the Department of Natural Resources and the letter they filed, as they termed it a notice of appeal, there's an appeal process in the ordinance in the Board of Adjustment section. It outlines who has standing to bring an appeal. So that would be one of the questions they have to hear. They have to decide who has standing, and then they would have to work through that appeals process and make a decision based on what the DNR has submitted in their letter dated November 18th, submitted to us on the 19th through email. So that's the process. I can't speak to if I even knew what they were going to do. I couldn't speak to it, and of course I don't know what they would do because we don't even have a full Board of Adjustment right now. The reason we don't have a full Board of Adjustment, just so you're not thinking we're slacking somehow, it's a 3-member board right now, and we had somebody just move. We haven't really even technically got their resignation yet, but they don't live in the township. One of the requirements to be on the Board of Adjustment is you have to live in the township. He does not live in the township. That leaves us with two people does not a Board of Adjustment make, so we have to add a body to it. So that will be their call as far as what they decide to do with that particular appeal. As far as what evidence they will be able to consider, again, they will be guided. We talked about making sure that we have an attorney available to them that works for the township, not anybody else, to give them any legal advice that they need as they go through that process. So,
Thank you so much for that.
I do have to go. I apologize. My name, my phone number is on the website. You can email me, you can call me, and you can certainly stop by my house if you need to.
Tony has to ask you a question.
Oh, that's right.
Half of my question was already
Tony, you need to
asked.
speak in your mic, please.
Half of my question was already asked. What is the elevation for this building? It's hard to see it right now.
Yep.
Does Art know?
I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yep, and I know that, so there's surveys that were done on this property, because the question I asked before I issued the permit, is it a bluff or a slope? Looking at the elevations based on the survey, it's a slope all the way to the very end, and even the very end past where the resort's gonna be, it may not be a bluff, it's very close. Whenever I get a bluff issue that I cannot determine, that it's not real clear to me whether it's a bluff or a slope, and when a homeowner wants to push right up to that line, I require a survey be done. It doesn't matter who does it, Straight Line does most of them up here. They are very reputable, they do a great job, and I think Straight Line did the work on this particular one. I would trust whatever Straight Line said as far as the slope, the elevation, the bluff, all that. But my understanding is the underground garage is above the elevation of the ordinary high water mark, so
Is there any consideration?
at least 3 feet above it.
Is there any consideration as far as the airport being so close?
I asked about that as well, and the answer that I got is that it's not close enough to prohibit that resort at the height that it's proposed at, so.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your great questions. And again, Dennis his contact information is on the website. And again, you can feel free to ask him any time. I'm sure that that you'll have more questions as well. So thank you so much. Please drive safe. No speeding.
Thank you. I won't speed. I don't want to get caught.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it, and I just appreciate working for this township. I've worked in government for most of my life, and I feel that it's an honor to do that, and I try to do a good job. And when I feel I'm not capable of doing a good job, then I will I have no problem stepping down, right? So I'm open to criticism, and certainly welcome any questions or suggestions anybody has. And I've met some great people working this township, so I appreciate that with all you guys. So have a good holidays. Thank you. I'll notice that when I get outside. Thanks.
Somebody's got to take care of them. So we can finish the presentation, but we need to wrap it up. It was much longer than I thought it would be, and I think it's more important to get at some of the questions and not have this go too late. Because some people have driven quite a ways to come here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll click right through these elevations. The next one is the other elevations on the lakeside. And I have a couple of sections that I've added to help explain. There was some question about 4-story versus 3-story. Like I said, the black here is cutted section, but the grade rises up to meet first floor pretty much everywhere around the building except the amenity piece. It's 5 feet lower and it's that grade at the top of the slope, not bank or bluff. And you can click to the images. This section shows, the top one is kind of more the typical guest room, one on each side, below grade parking, and you can see that the grade comes up from the very right. Where the woods are down at the bottom is where the lake show is, so we have the 75-foot ordinary water line setback, and most areas of the residential guest unit wings, the sleeping wings, are an additional 45 feet plus beyond that 75-foot setback. The trees aren't shown here, but they are on the bluff, and as many as will all be protected during construction. The zone close to the building, just for like a 45-degree swath from the basement up, will be disturbed, certainly. And then the bottom slide is a section through the amenity area, so you can see in sort of purple there, the pool area and fireplace lounge, step down to follow, and walk out at the top of the, where the current terrace is right now, and a few feet back from that. So low-grade parking and a two-story lobby on the way. The next slides, views from the highway side and a new entry and a welcoming presence for visitors. The next slide, a night shot that does show the full width of this. We didn't have a recent one, and this was done prior to having surveyed. This doesn't show the amount of tree cover that will be on the facades, and we are not proposing to do any new walls down by the lake. This was done prior to that straight line survey that we received. On the right, the bottom image, you can see the scale of those trees on the waterfront, on the slope. Those will remain. The middle slide, kind of hard to see with this light, is the original Sand Lake stone wall and stairs and sign that'll stay. And the top is just an overview of looking down at the waterfront. There should not be much of any changes from that viewpoint outward, lakeside. Next slide. This is, again, ignore the walls down by the water. Those were done before we had the existing survey of the terrace, but that terrace represents pretty much where it is right now. The one-story piece that comes out for that lounge and pool area with the roof deck on it is the piece that comes up close. Everything else is set back so that it recedes. And again, these trees are not as big as the current trees on site. Next slide. This is the existing, this view is a couple of years old. That's when they had a drone out there. We didn't think a view this last week would do us much good from can't walk on the ice. But, and I was not trying to crop this off. This is the view we had, so we dropped in an image in the next slide, and the next, that's kind of halfway, and then the scale of the building and the existing trees that will remain on the frontage. So we have really tried to keep it recessed and screened, and not a big impact to the lake, back and forth. And then the last slide is just a side-by-side comparison of it's kind of a before and after. That's all I have. Any question? I'll sit down.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, with that said, we went through the presentation. Dennis was able to go through his and answer his questions. I will start with, if there's any questions right now on Zoom for the sanitary district, or we can basically open up, or Mr. Lampert, or the Department of Natural Resources. Does anyone have just a question on Zoom? And if you could let me know who it is it's directed to, so I can make sure and get the right person to answer.
Anybody on Zoom wanting to ask a question, raise your hand. So far, no hands raised.
Okay. I'll put that on hold for a minute. Is there anyone from the audience that has a specific question? And if you do, could you let me know who it's directed towards? I know Paula has several of them. Is there anybody else? Yes, if you could. Yes, if you could come forward and introduce yourself to the podium.
Good evening. I'm vaxxed and boosted. I took the mask off for volume. My questions are focused to Mr. Lambert. My first question, and I apologize.
Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, I apologize. Amanda Kessel. I have a cabin on Sand Lake. We've been there over 10 years and are just incredibly grateful to be here. I would like to start with, have you addressed what the capacity differential is? I know you spoke of bedrooms, but that doesn't speak to bodies. What is the capacity absolutely of human beings now? And what will be the capacity at the time that if this were realized?
Is that, how many questions do you have? Maybe if you have.
Just 4.
Okay, so the first one, capacity.
Yes.
Because then I'll have to ask Mr. Lampert if you see what the logistics is. I have to have Mr. Lampert to come up front.
Can you take Dennis's spot?
You want me to sit here?
Or, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, then you can come up here. That would be good. Why don't you come and take his mic? Yep. So then you can address each question. I don't have to remember them. Because I don't remember. Well,
Fair.
Sorry, which one, this one?
both.
Both of them, all right. With respect to the capacity, it's so hard to program. Essentially, we have 26 additional bedrooms. That's what we're talking about. At the end of the day, we bump up and down with numbers throughout the year. 4th of July, for example, we have campers, we have RVs, we have a number of other people. So it's really hard to say, I have 14 more bodies, I have 23 more bodies. I think the best measure I have for you is that we have 26 additional bedrooms.
I know, and I'm in law, I'm in public defense, I know about story span. What I'm asking is what is absolute capacity, maxed out right now. Like your dream, like you're filled every bedroom, life is good now, and I want to compare that to if every bedroom was filled in this new reality.
And sleeping area.
What's that?
And
Sleeping areas are not always in bedrooms.
Right, absolutely. So we've got pullouts, and I mean, surely the fire marshal has some idea of the max number of human beings he's permitting in this structure.
I haven't calculated a max number, I don't have the fire marshal number, so I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you.
Okay, is every bedroom to have only 1 mattress?
I don't have that information for you.
Okay. Is that something that you're willing to share when you find out?
Sure.
Okay. How prepared are you to revise this? You said that you were excited to be here and to hear our feedback. How willing are you to make adjustments? Because I think the number one concern I'm hearing is the volume. Are you open to changing that? Because I felt very concerned when I heard that 49 is a threshold, and that by dipping under that number, you didn't really need our words or our thoughts or concerns. So is there wiggle room or negotiation space with regard to this 49 unit, 26 extra bedroom dream, and what the community would feel more comfortable with?
As I said earlier, I'm listening, right? We're permitted for 49 units. I'm here to have a neighborhood meeting to discuss our 49 units, and I'm also listening.
So would it be fair for us to come away from this feeling like you are not going to max out based on what you can do, but that you're actually going to hear the input and make adjustments based on that?
I'm permitted for 49 units, and I'm listening.
Okay, I think we all understood that. And then my next question is the water issue. I don't know if any of you follow any of the issues in the cities, but White Bear Lake had massive issues with the volume of the physical lake. People who had a beach, suddenly it was almost a football field to get to the lake. And one of the reasons attributed to that was the excessive development that happened in White Bear Lake and them not taking proper planning procedures for where that water was coming from. How are you able to guarantee that we won't be in the same situation, since those of us who've been here a long time, and I know that includes you, have seen this lake fluctuate, and unfortunately it's really been on the downside. I have a hard time getting my pontoon within a football's throw of my dock as it is, so I have grave concerns about that.
The well drillers are required to obtain a strict permit. If there's an area that's trouble, they have trouble getting permits, or they have to make special precautions. So I guess I would say the well driller will have to look at any issues that are related to the water levels.
Okay, that didn't help White Bear Lake, but I hear what you're saying. Finally,
I would just say, I'm here on a neighborly basis, and you're very antagonistic, and I'm gonna stop answering the questions if you continue to backtalk. I think that was one of the earlier rules.
Backtalk, respectfully, sir.
We
You're
need to
not
just
in
keep it to the
authority.
questions, and like I said, I need to keep a really good decorum. I understand the emotions, and it's very, very hard, but if you have questions and if there's further things we can follow up on, like I said, I'll help facilitate that.
Absolutely. I have one last question, and I was under the impression that we were adults having a conversation. I did not intend to backtalk. I would ask, are you intending to have any parking spots that will be double long that would facilitate the parking of a trailer for a boat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. We have two on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
So one was submitted via the chat to the moderator. It says this. This is Milton Ospina. Question, how many trees will be removed, parentheses, for construction, as per current slide on display?
We don't have a specific count at this point. As part of our building permit application, we will have a tree plan or a tree removal plan that will give a specific number, so I don't have a number for you tonight.
And then Sheila, you can unmute and ask your question. Sheila, if you are there, it's your turn.
Yes. Here's my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Why is Mr. Lampert circumventing the capacity question? He's obfuscating the overuse his expansion will create on this very small lake. Why?
I've indicated that we have 26 additional bedrooms. I don't know if there's one person or two person in those bedrooms. I've indicated that the resort bounces up and down with numbers throughout the year. Sometimes we have people with one person per bedroom, sometimes we have two. So I sincerely do not know the answer to that. I am not trying to cover anything up. I am not trying to be less than genuine. I don't know the answer to that.
That's a non-answer.
Thank you.
Is there, that's it on Zoom then? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone again from the audience that has a question? If you'd like to get back up to the podium?
Okay, again, nervous, hate doing this, but it's needed. So, I wasn't intending to ask this, but I want to ask the architect. Because I was an architect. You put up plans like that, you know how many people can sleep in those rooms. So I think as a group, we deserve some kind of an answer about how many people are planned to be in this resort. How many can it hold? How many can sleep in it?
Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Again, the units are laid out from alcove style or basically a hotel suite style that presumably, I think we counted all those as a bedroom. There are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units. In addition to that, they all on plan show a bed in the room, double bed sort of thing. We don't have any shown in plan that have multiple beds stacked up. In terms of how other areas of the unit are operated, can't say.
So no plans for pullouts in the living room?
There are sofas in the living room. I haven't heard their operational plans for how many to use.
How many people do your kitchens serve? Like those units that have kitchens?
It's a standard kitchen if you want to cook for the weekend or you want to cook your fish.
And 5, 6 people go in there at once? I mean, that's another indicator of how many people are planned to be in that living space.
We don't have giant, I don't know how to answer a count for a kitchen. They are standard kitchens for the size of the unit.
So
They don't,
would it be
they
fair
vary
to
from
say, would it be fair to say that in one of your 3-bedroom units, you could potentially sleep 12 people?
I don't know if the fire marshal would allow that.
Can we get an answer as to what the fire marshal would allow?
There are 3 bedrooms and a living room space and a kitchen
Yeah.
in those units.
And I would put that out there as a question for the township to answer.
Yes, and these are all these really good, thoughtful questions. If you can, again, you feel free to especially like email the clerk with those to get an answer. The one thing that I'd like to leave before we leave tonight is to give you an idea of when we can get some of these questions answered, to give you some kind of a timeline. I think that's important as well, so they're not just hanging out there, so you have an idea. I don't know what that time frame is, but to give some kind of an idea, I think that's good. So thank you so much.
My next question is for Mark. Hopefully he can answer this one.
And if you can keep, I know you're nervous, so just speaking in like that's so helpful.
All right.
Thank you so much.
So you said that you plan to have 25 boat slips,
Correct.
and you're going to have a boat club.
Correct.
My knowledge of boat clubs is that those boats can be on the water sometimes up to 20 hours a day. Early morning fishing, recreational, then back out after dark for more fishing, so 20 hours a day. So I did some mathematics. 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's 140 boat hours per boat. How many boats, are you gonna do 25 boats in your boat club?
No, I don't expect that. I expect, well, frankly, I guess I don't know. I'm guessing there may be 6, maybe eight boats.
Okay,
My
so-
thought is, just to be fair, my thought is to do pontoons based on the demand that the residents have and let that dictate it.
So probably up to 25 boats.
And just so you know, that's the current number of spaces that we have available.
Right, but-
So I don't know that I guess my point was, I continued to hear that there was 50, and I was gonna build 50.
No,
We're not building
wait.
50. So we're only,
Here's the difference, okay? When you're offering a boat up for boat club use, it's used by multiple people all throughout the day. And that increases the number, I mean, people tend to think of boat traffic on the lake as the number of boats out on the lake at once. But it's not just that. It's the number of boats out on the lake times the number of hours that those boats are out there. If he has 10 boats in a boat club, that's 1,400 additional boat hours on the lake. I just think that needs to be absorbed, and quite frankly, I can't wrap my head around that. I can't wrap my head around why you would take a quiet lake like this and do that to it.
Do you have another question?
No, I think I'm done.
Okay. Thank you so much. And don't forget again, like I said, to, email those, the ones that you want for sure answered. That would be appreciated. Paula, hold on one second. I just want to make sure. Is there anyone else that has just a question, one question instead of several that hasn't been heard yet? If you could come up to the podium, sir. And your name?
Rick Plowing, lived on Sand Lake, moved here a little over 3 years ago, and loved it and brought it, so.
Yeah.
Anyways, my question is with Mr. Lambert here. Looks like a really nice place, but, now, did you add those floating docks? Is that your 25 slip, structure?
correct.
Okay, so that was just in the last year or two, wasn't it, that you added that? Yeah, so that was just a recent add-on. The other is kind of a follow-up on that, as far as, I'm assuming it's like your little rental maybe then you're gonna have, so no people that come there will be bringing their own boats or jet skis?
That's correct.
So I mean, so you'll have 25, and that's jet skis, pontoons, boats, the whole 9 yards.
Correct.
And you would sign something to that effect, saying you would not exceed that, because, trust me, I mean, we got a couple jet skis, but, put trolling motors on ours, But you get people that want to go ripping around there, 90 miles an hour, and like I said, it's, and if you have it in addition to your slips, where they can, just pull it up on the beach, well, then, you could add, another dozen easily to that amount, so. My question just has to do with that.
Yeah, and I live on the lake as well, and so my intent is not to have it get out of control. My intent is to try to manage it. The choices that we have are just let everybody bring their boats and have 50 slips and make a mess out of it. That's not where we're at. Where we're at is trying to do a controlled boat club. I know that no matter how I present something, it's gonna be with suspicion, but my intent is sincere, that we wanna make sure that we're regulating the boats. Yeah, we sure as hell don't need any jet skis, we sure as hell don't need any jet skis with radios that are running up and down. I saw the comments on the boats, I guess that's kind of the same concern, so, I mean, at some point, there's some frustrations here, but I don't think it all comes to lay to rest at the concept of a new resort. I think some of this is perhaps, enforcement, some of this is perhaps other neighbors, or maybe it's even the public landing, so.
Yeah, I mean, the landing does have, like I said, the public landing, so you do get weekend warriors coming up and stuff like that, but that's like you said, if you can limit the number of slips there versus people just come up, because they want to bring their boat if they have a boat, but if you can limit to, it's a no boat policy, you can rent them from us, but you can't bring them up, that's.
I often wondered how many boats we could save on the lake if we actually implemented maybe a parking restriction over at the landing, because at some point,
I
you have
thought
so
they
many.
should have something over there, have a fee for launching your boat to take care of the milfoil.
Was that 20 boats or is that 25 boats?
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Sandy, right?
Sorry, I'm Sandy Keene. My husband John and I have been on the lake since 1974. And my question is for the sewer board, and I'm sorry to bring this up. It's getting so dry in here, I'm sorry. And I feel like so much of this has been done under the radar. But we've not been allowed to be a part of any of this until now. And so we're naturally full of hundreds of questions. My question is that a lot of us have heard, excuse me, that if this project goes through, no water and sewer projects can go on Moose Lake. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't.
Her question was, she said that if this project goes through, then there would be no more capacity for any other development?
Yeah, we had, that was what we had heard, was that the number of units asked, that was gonna max out the sewer, and that could possibly stop additional building in Moose Lake. So we were wondering, one, if that was true, and also kind of in the same realm as all of these questions about how much people will be there, et cetera. We're assuming that there's been some feasibility studies, either by Mark or his company on, what the trends would be during the weeks and a certain volume of people. Would that go into the sewer discussions, and what's the answer on volume?
Okay, so I represent the Moose Lake Windemere Sanitary Sewer District. We provide sewer service around Sand Lake and currently to the Sand Lake Resort. We send our wastewater to the city of Moose Lake. They pump it up to their ponds, they treat it, they have the discharge permit, and so we don't do any discharging. The issue of capacity is really on the city. We've met with the city, we've had discussion with, the sewer district has met with the city, we've talked about this. The MPCA will not let a large development or development of this size take place until the pond capacity gets to 80%. The last we heard, it was about 93%, but the city, and I should probably let them do their talking, but they've been taking measures to eliminate clear water that's entering the system, and they're bringing the pond capacity down. And when I talk pond capacity, it's so many 1,000 gallons per day. When Mark puts a request to us, if he asked a request right today, we'd say, we cannot grant you permission to expand because the city, we would have to go to the city first and get permission from them. And once the city says that they have enough capacity for Mark, if the city is willing to give it to the sewer district, as long as Mark has a permit and he's met the other requirements, we would let him, we would give him that, we would grant him that capacity. I shouldn't say grant, he would be paying for it.
So what has the city been saying then about the capacity?
Thank you again. I'm Matt Wolf. I serve as the city engineer for Moose Lake. I'm going to try to keep this really brief, but in 2018, the city of Moose Lake said, you know what, our ponds are getting to their capacity. When I say capacity, anything, once you get over about 80-85%, it's frowned upon by the state that you're issuing more permits, that you need to start doing something about it. 2019, they engaged us as city engineer to do a pond capacity study in August of 2019. We said, yep, you're at about 93% of your pond capacity. Not likely you're going to be able to have any new connections here in the very near future. The City Council, working with the Public Works Department, decided that they needed to either A, expand their ponds, or B, reduce the flow to the sewer. Expanding ponds, not a great option, so they started an I&I reduction project. If you're from the area, you've seen we've been doing sewer lining projects. We did one 2 years ago, we did one last year and one this year, and we have one programmed for next year already. That program is showing some very good results already. At this moment in time, we do not have the capacity to grant any project, and when I say the city is trying to reduce I&I, it's for the city of Moose Lake and the township. It is not for a specific project. This was going on well before we knew anything about the Sand Lake project. This has to happen regardless. So as the sewer board said, as capacity hopefully comes online, it is a kind of a first come, first serve. The city will have some of their priorities in place, but if this project is ready and the sewer board would come to the city and the capacity was there, then it would be up to the city council to make that decision.
The only other one I have, because I know we're way over, is are we going to have a follow-up meeting that we can continue with the questions that we have in addition to getting answers in writing?
We need to discuss that I can't make that decision because I'm just, one of three. But I can't imagine not having more informational meeting as details come along and more information is provided. Because I think it's important, because you're right, this is just, for many of you, even though we've discussed this permit several times at our township meetings that are all, you can listen to them online. This is the, like you said, just the first informational meeting, to make it, so that you folks know what's going on. So I can't imagine that there won't be more, more meetings to provide more information as we know more. So I appreciate that.
And could I just add, I do think that, Mark, as you said, just the building alone may not be the only contributor to some of the issues that we're having with voting and other things.
Yeah.
But I do think that the volume and the type of clientele and everything else that's going to come in is going to affect things. And without having the DNR do an EAW, and we haven't talked about water runoff, exactly what's going to be the pond capacity that you're having, and a lot of the other erosion and other things, and we want to hear more from the DNR and some of the county and the state representatives to help us figure out why there isn't more impact and involvement from the county and the state to preserve our lakes. So, for the next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you had a specific question, Paula, for Heidi Lindgren at the DNR that you thought maybe this would, a question for her today would be helpful for you?
Well, a lot of the ones we had, I think, for the DNR, mainly it started out around what are they not approving? Obviously they're not, because they're appealing the decision, and that will be another conversation, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But also, will there be a no wake zone? Will there be more presence from the DNR with the boats? One of the things with having rentals is that people may not know the boat laws. They may not follow those. Is there going to be any way that you can actually monitor that? No, unless they have a license for it. But it just shows that we need a higher DNR presence. And also issues for ARS. Is there going to be monitoring of the boats that do come in and out if they bring their own boats?
Do you want me to see, Heidi Lindgren, if you're still on Zoom, if you have anything that you have that maybe would be helpful for some of the residents to speak to this project or to Paula's question specifically?
Yeah, I can speak to some of those. First, regarding an EAW.
And Heidi, maybe you can introduce yourself and really tell them, what you do here and then where you're out of and stuff. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Heidi Lindgren. I am an area hydrologist with the DNR. So I work on permits for work below the ordinary high water level. I work with zoning, with folks on zoning ordinances when there are variances and things like that. I also help with overall watershed planning and projects like that. Your area is going to come up for watershed planning very soon in this next coming 2022. So those are just some of the things I do. So I guess I want to clarify some of the just very most recent questions. The EAW, the regulatory government for that, so the unit of government that would oversee an EAW for this project is actually Windemere Township. It's not the DNR. And for the EAW or environmental review, because there were at 49 units with 50% hired, citizens can
Heidi, you're breaking up a little bit. We lost you.
And there shouldn't be not quite by law, but it might be a good idea.
So I think I got from the beginning and end of your sentence that we as the public can ask for it, even though it's not required, it might be a good idea for us to do that. And how could we go about doing that?
Is that what you said, Heidi?
That's. Sorry, what was that?
No, she asked, can the citizens at this point petition for an environmental assessment worksheet to be done?
I believe so.
Okay. So
yeah,
maybe
I'm not part of EQB, so the Environmental Quality Board is a separate entity. It's a separate organization outside of the DNR and PCA, so.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. We'll get a follow up on that.
Yeah. And then regarding no wake zones, that's something that starts at the local government level too. You would probably start by talking to the sheriff's office about that. And then Pine County also has the AIS monitoring. I know in Aiken and Crow Wing counties, where I also work, a lot of the resorts have to do their own AIS monitoring. They'll either hire somebody outright or they'll work with the Lake Association to do AIS boat inspections, or you don't have a boat launched here, so you wouldn't necessarily need a decontamination unit. But resort owners are an important part of control for invasive species.
Okay. Paul, was there anything else for Heidi at this time?
Would there be any, or how do we get heightened DNR presence on the lake? With additional boaters and the concerns we have with boat safety, I mean, part of that is existing, but, just with the added capacity, how do we get more DNR presence?
Well, Dusty Speldrich is the enforcement officer assigned to your area. I would, we have, she has a large area to cover, like all of our enforcement officers do. So probably talking with her and enforcement supervisors. And if you don't have her contact information, I can provide that too.
Yes, we'll follow up on that and get that from Heidi. Okay. I think that's probably enough since we're way over, but
Well, thank you. No, it's important. It's important. Yes, for sure. And that's why, we want to be done at 8:30, but the presentation was longer, so I want to, with respect to everyone being here, make sure those that, again, took your important time to come here have had the ability to ask questions. So
I do have a comment, if you don't mind. Mr. Lampert.
You have to talk louder, Tony.
Yeah. Your project is fabulous. Let me just tell you that. It looks impressive, it looks nice, and everything like that. And as far as the number of people that, you can have in your establishment. Hotels are doing it, and I'm sure you've done enough of these projects to know. You check into a place, they ask you how many people. If you want more than 2 people, they charge you extra or whatever. And I'm sure you don't want 20 people in, 2-bedroom apartment. Having said that, all these people that are here and people that are on Zoom and they're watching on the cable channel, these are all your neighbors. You mentioned that you've been on the Sound Lake for 25 years, give or take 3 years, and you purchased Sound Lake for 15 years. Most of these people, like I said, they're your neighbors, friends, acquaintances. As you know, that's a 500-acre lake. It's not really, expansive. It's 1/3 of Sturgeon Lake, let's say. And most
I'm sorry, Tony, you just got really belted out.
most people on that lake, they have cabin, and they've been probably in the same family and for generations. Those people, they chose that place just like you did, for peace and quiet, for the environment and so forth. Your project is beautiful, I would be proud to have it in the Windemere Township or any cities around. I just don't think it's right for that property. And Windemere Township, and I can't speak for Moose Lake and area, we need senior housing / apartment. We need workforce housing, because people, they work in the hospital and nursing home and probably prison, or we don't have enough housing. We need affordable housing, and the project that you have, I cannot afford to get in there for a day. It's beautiful, and so people that you're gonna bring to this property is gonna be a guy with a wakeboard, with the with not, and that's your model, and more power to you. I'm a businessman, I want more businesses for this area, I want people that they live here, stay here. We're losing a lot of our kids to the city because we don't have jobs or we don't have places for them to stay. So, you're a very well-known man over here. Everybody knows you or you know of them. So please take this energy that you have, this money, this project that you have, and put it on the different property. This lake that's all we moved here. I lived in Maple Grove. I lived on the lake also over there. I moved to Sturgeon Lake because of peace and quiet. We don't have any white noises, we don't have any garbage truck backing up, we don't have any sirens going, 24 hours a day. So, I don't want to tell you what to do. Absolutely, you know way more than I ever know as far as the building structure. What I see over here is very impressive. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have that somewhere else, because although you said that, you've been here for 25 years, I think you live in somewhere else. I think this is your cabin, I assume. I'm not sure. So, these people over here, they're all your neighbors and they don't want this project. So please, I'm thinking that put them on hold. Let's get, let's not rush through this. And let's not, because once you force it, these guys are not gonna stop at this point. They're gonna keep coming back. This is just the inquiries about this project. And I'm a restaurant guy, so I don't know anything about this project. So, and it's not just like your project. there's gonna be more projects, I'm thinking. If you have this 49 unit, who's gonna tell Sunday that, hey, you cannot do 49 units? Who's gonna tell the golf course? You know, you got, I don't know how many acres, you're not allowed to put it because we changed the law all of a sudden, in the middle of. So in order to be fair to the community, let's put this on hold. Let's, just work through all the, hooplas that, we're going through. And I'm sure all of these people that they don't like it now, they all be behind you. That's all.
Is there anyone else that has any questions tonight? And we're gonna try to wrap it up by 9 o'clock.
I will be brief. I'm John Engstrom. As I look around the room, I'm not sure there's anybody here who can claim to have been on Sand Lake longer than me. If anybody can top 81 years, tell me. Actually goes back a little more than that when I was in my mother's womb that my parents bought.
Too much information.
So I've been around a long time. And Mike, I really like the discussion and questions. But for me, it comes down to the changes I've seen over that 80 years. What I remember as a kid, well, my grandpa's little rowboat, first of all, as we would go around the lake, what it was like. There were, some of you probably don't know, back then there were 4 or 5 farms around the lake. There were not many cabins, really. There were some here and there, but it was pretty wide open. Anyway, over the years, it's been growing. The building has been growing and growing and growing. A lot of us have torn down our original cabins and put up new ones because we love it there. But as I see what's happening now, I could tell you a lot of stories about that then, but I won't. What I see happening now, everything it seems to me as we get bigger and better in everything we do, there's a tipping point, right? Where there's no turning back. Where you can never recover. And my fear is that this marvelous plan is a tipping point for Sand Lake. That's it.
And I appreciate the comments. I want to just make sure that if people have questions, that would be really great to field for the folks here. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, come on up. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Roald Saturn, and our family has also been on the lake for a long time. We were one of the 4 or 5 farm families going back to the turn of the century. My mother was born in 1918 in Moose Lake. Mr. Lambert, you talked about assets at the beginning of your presentation, assets for the community. And I'm wondering who the assets are for. You and Summit Development. And if not, who are the assets for? That would be one question.
Okay.
And then the other one is the zoning guy. Is it Dennis?
Yes.
Yeah, he was talking about he just has to approve the plans because that's his job. He can't tell neighbors what color to paint their houses or what size or whatever. That's out of his discretion. So you leave it on the trust of your neighbors to make good calls. And I'm just wondering, do you consider your neighbors in that little teeny bay? And you guys talk about this beautiful development. When I saw the picture of that for the first time on the back of the Star Gazette, I thought it was a monstrosity on little sand, it's built for like Lake Superior or something, not a little teeny bay on Sand Lake. So those are my 2 questions. Who's the asset, and did you consider your neighbors?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mark, if you want to come up and, okay.
Obviously, I'm pretty sure no matter what I say is not going to answer your question to your satisfaction. In my opinion, I've made a very good career providing great housing, providing great places, providing great units to people to live in. So some of those people are not here tonight. And so to the extent that I'm trying to create something for what would be a larger community, that's what I consider the asset. I understand your implication that I'm doing it for selfish purposes. That's not my asset. My asset is trying to build something nice for the community. That's why I brought in Mr. Bartels. That's why I ran this resort for 18 years without any recognition or any comments from anybody, because I took care of that resort. And so I guess I bristle a little bit at the implication that this is something other than a community effort, because I really am trying to do a community effort, and I am trying to listen to the community and what's here as well. Everything that I've done so far was within the context of what we were permitted to do. I'm willing to take the comments, I'm willing to take some of the chides, that's fair. But on the other hand, I have done nothing wrong. And I have followed what has been in the code, and I've ran that resort for 18 years, and this is my vision. And maybe not all of you share the vision with me, and I understand that. And that's where we as neighbors, because that's what I am to you as well, have a chance to have a discussion about this. And that's where I'm listing.
Okay. Fair enough.
Did that answer your questions?
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you so much. And we'll field two more questions. Sir, if you want to come up. Is it for Mr. Lampert? Okay.
I'm Tracy Barish, just live down the street from you. My first thought is I kind of like this. I'm an extreme liberal, but there are some things I would like to see that might help. You should have done a feasibility study. I'm sure you've done it for cost. I would like to see, could we see that feasibility study? The other thing I'd like to see is the use. You've got 17 years of running that resort. So that means you have all the data per week of occupancy. So you probably have a nice steady graph of what you expect to see every year. So what does that graph look like for the future, for this 49 unit? It would be nice to see that. I think that would help people see how many people are going to be on there during snowmobile season, during fishing. So we could actually see, how noisy it's going to be for every given month. So if that can be presented, I think that would help you convince some people that this isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. So is that something you
Appreciate it. There was no feasibility study done. I don't do feasibility studies. It's a little bit like an appraisal. You can get high appraisals, you can get low appraisals, and at some point, who knows, right? So the reality of it is, I believe that the facility that we're proposing, the resort that we're proposing, will be a success. I was concerned when it was larger. I know there's some implications that I somehow gamed the system by going from 78 to 49 to avoid any AW. Frankly, the real concern was I didn't know that the market was here. And if there was a way to build an underground parking garage, if there was a way to build an underground parking garage with 20 units and then 20 units or whatever the math works out to, I'd rather do that too.
So right now you don't even yourself, you have a marketing person here, you don't even know if you're going to break even building this project.
Well, I'll tell you what, I lost money on the resort for 10 years owning it, all right?
I believe that.
So, I guess my goal here is to try to develop something that's nice for the community, nice for us, that allows us to frankly be proud of it. And I know that's a vision that not everybody shares, but that's where our head is at.
I would say, as a person in the community, can you do a feasibility study for us? I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, I've done some myself, so I know it's not that hard to, but if you've got the data from 17 years, even if it's losing data, and you've been building buildings for other places, community colleges, so you know how much costs are.
Sure.
I mean, really a feasibility study is the least thing you could do to present to the city, because at some point you have to go to the sewer department and say, in June of 2025, I'm going to have 250 people pooping in my house. Can you handle that? Right? I mean, you have to have an idea of how many people per month. Otherwise, how are they going to make a decision?
I think you had a two-part question. I think, can you do a feasibility study? Sure. Am I prepared to do that? I'm not sure why. right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we have a sense of where this has been. We've done this kind of building before. I believe this building will work. And I don't know that as creating a feasibility study, other than spending money for something that isn't gonna tell me what I don't think I already know, is gonna help me with. With that said, I've heard the questions loud and clear about capacity, because I think that's really what you're trying to get at is.
Correct, as a community person.
And I've heard that question, you know, what kind of numbers are you looking at? I think we all struggle with that because it comes up and down. And I know the issue is fire marshal, or is somebody sleeping in the kitchen? You know, again, I don't think we're trying to be cute with that. I just don't think we have an easy way to quantify those numbers to say, hey, there's 38 more people, or there's 74 more people than what we have now.
I say you have a very easy way to do that. It's a feasibility study, because you currently have 17 years of 56 units right now. Is that what you said currently? 27 right now you're currently using. So you already know how many people you've had for 17 years per week. So you could very well easily show what you expect that to be increased by with a simple graph.
And maybe what we should do, rather than back and forth, I'd be happy to talk to you about what you had in mind, because I frankly haven't done a feasibility study with any of our projects. So this would be, I'm 30 buildings into this, and we haven't done a feasibility study. So as you and I banter back and forth.
I can't imagine doing a single project without doing a feasibility study, especially this scale.
There's the polls we're coming from.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And in the
I'm
essence
just
of.
3 houses down. So.
Yeah. And with respect to the time, and it's getting late, and again, some people have to travel, I can take one more question. Last question. And then I will wrap it up with a few comments as well.
Mark Proctor again. My question is, you said your building is showing its age. Granted, it probably is. Why a 3-4 story building? Why not just another building that size that's so much more efficient than your old building? And that would show the community that you're not trying to just show off, you're just trying to make things better.
Thank you.
And to answer your question, the why is part of what my vision was. And my vision is underground parking, which I think would be very, very critical to that. And that kind of speaks to the year-round approach that we're trying to do. I frankly think underground parking and an elevator, which tends to dictate taller buildings and larger buildings.
But you're not really permitted for year-round.
I'm permitted as a resort. I think the challenge we have here, and I guess maybe it's a good chance to respond to that, the challenge we have here is the world of definitions when it comes to hotels, when it comes to resorts, when it comes to extended stay hotels, when it comes to apartments, is really blurring. The traditional apartment building over here and the traditional hotel building over here is really starting to blur the lines. And I will posit to you that that's really where we're at as well. We're an extended stay resort, and I'll fight with that all day long. And there's really no solid definition that says, Mark, you have to rent your resort out every single night for a different person every single day. That's just not the reality of what's happening, and that's not what's out there. So the challenge we have is, are we an apartment building? No, we're going to have daily, weekly. Are we a hotel? No, we're not going to have every single day, every single person moving out, because that's not the reality. Nobody fits into that category. So the challenge we all have, and maybe this is where some of the frustration comes from, is, you know, what does an extended stay look like? It's changing. VRBOs, bad term, but the reality of it is they're doing daily rentals in some of the lake homes that are out there, right? Apartments now are starting to do daily rentals in order to accomplish it. So I don't think so much of it is being cute as it is the reality that people's expectations are changing as to what period of time you're going to rent something. And I guess I would still, and I heard the comment back, I think, from somebody saying, well, gee, what happens if he lives there all year? Well, I guess I would put that out to say, wouldn't that be a good thing to have the owner of that building there all year so that you can watch it? I guess the alternative is we can leave this as it is, and perhaps we sell it, and perhaps we go down the road and the next owner can take care of it. I don't need to do this. But I guess the reality of it is I think it's a nice offer when somebody's willing to live in the property to make sure it runs the way they're supposed to, as opposed to run and hide.
Oh, I do too. I just don't think it needs to be 80 feet in the air.
39, I think, or 35, 35.
Yeah, so, thank you.
I just have to say something here.
Okay, that really,
And
it's
then-
getting
no,
very, very late.
yeah.
We need to go up to
No.
the mic.
to say things.
Fine.
I'm sorry, but we're here for a reason.
I get that it's late, but
That's
I
fine.
feel it's important to
And
just
again,
say
let me
something
say,
here.
it's,
And it's simply this, I'm Doug Craig, I'm listening to your comments, I'm not necessarily disagreeing about the beef over how you define extended stay and all, but frankly, I think that's a minutia of what the real concern is here. The concern is how damn big this thing is and the tranquility and the effect it will have for people who've been on the lake for years and plan to be on the lake for years. So the rest of, I mean, there's other details, I get it. Sewer size, effect on the aquifers, which by the way, I am a degree geologist, so some of the comments the lady was making before were spot on, okay? But the beef is about the size of this thing. And it's hard for anybody to sit here, and I've worked for the world's biggest oil company for 17 years, and not look at this and say, this just has money written all over it. Let's be honest. You're not going out there to break even. So if you can deal with the size, the effect on the lake for people who want to be out there like me, enjoying a little fishing occasionally and those sorts of things, I think that'll go a long ways.
Thank you.
That's it.
And I very much appreciate that you're here for listening and comments and stuff like that, but at some point, I do need to wrap it up, and I do need to get it, and we've been here since 6:30, it's now 9 o'clock. Like I said, if I let it go on, we probably would be here till 11, so I apologize. This isn't the end, this isn't a decision point. It is an informational meeting. So with that said, before people leave, there was some very good questions. I would like, the lady that talked about the black mask on. I have a question I need to follow up with you on to make sure that I got everything correctly. And a few others that had some questions, I want to make sure that you follow up and you get those questions to me or the clerk or even Dennis. But question for, are we going to continue? I think, you know, like I said, this is the first one. This isn't going to be the last one. I'm just going to throw it out there. Again, I'm only one person on the board, so that's my perspective. The board will have to, of course, make a motion and vote on having another meeting. It's not up to me. But I do have a question. When do you think that we could get, because there's a lot of questions that we just didn't know the answer to. When is it from the sewer perspective that you might know about the capacity and when something like that could even be a possibility to be considered? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? What's your thoughts?
Unfortunately, longer than that. We go on a 5-year average for
Okay.
looking at pond capacity. We only have 1 year under our belt of a study, so next August we will do the next study and have 2 years of planning
Data?
projects.
Okay.
So the earliest we'll have any good indication would be next fall, but as far as when an answer, don't know. It depends how well the projects go.
And if even the, and just forgive me, if the capacity goes down, would the city be able to at that point consider making a determination for capacity increase? Or you
Well, I am not a city councilor, so I can't answer that one,
That's
but
fine.
they certainly would be able to bring that to the council at that point.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get a time frame when we can get some of these questions answered to you, so I don't call another meeting where you get a lot of I don't knows. Mr. Lampert, when do you think, like, the biggest issue was the capacity? How many people? What's the fire code capacity? What are you looking at for number of people? How many people per unit? When would you have a thought or an idea on something like that? Again, I'm trying to frame it for these people to give them a timeline of when we potentially would have more answers, so we would have another informational, whatever it is. And you need to come up here, I'm sorry. I know, it's the part of the Zoom and I'm trying to be respectful.
No, I guess we're ready for a neighborhood meeting anytime, any place. I'm certainly willing to continue the discussion and dialogue. So Heidi, I would say whatever you want to schedule something, we'll try to get the answers as soon as we can. Obviously, it's holidays, so I don't know if that's mid-January, late January, or when you might want to do it, or when the next board meeting is, so.
Okay, so that gives me a direction that for sure with those questions that you have brought up, and you have many concerns, so let's make sure and get them to poor Cindy, and with those questions and stuff like that, I will field them and channel them to the appropriate person. I cannot answer them all, but I certainly will. And again, this is one of 3 jobs for me, so I will try to be as expeditious as I can getting the answers for you and back to you. But it looks like it's going to be a little bit before we even can consider the sewer capacity. So that gives you some time frame. as well, but I want to keep these questions thoughtful, and I want to make sure and be as timely as I can. So get your questions that weren't answered tonight, make sure and get them to the clerk so I can keep them in the forefront, so I can keep them, keep this moving so you don't feel forgotten or anything like that. And as new things come up, please pay attention to the Windemere Township website, because we do have our monthly meetings. The agenda is always, it's posted before the meeting. Is that correct? The agenda is posted online before the meeting?
Yeah.
It's usually like a day before? A day before, then you can see the items that are discussed. There's a way to link in via Zoom, so you'll be able to see what's on the agenda at that item and what's being discussed. Also on the website, you can see when the Planning Commission meets. I believe we're meeting for a special meeting in February that has nothing to do with the resort, but again, that's another, option. We also are, like Dennis said, Mr. Jenner said, we're also having to convene the Board of Adjustment or Appeals, I believe it is, forget which one, too many boards. And as soon as that meeting is to discuss this permit issuance, you're gonna see that posted, because we have to make that public. You see in the newspaper and see it posted, but we have to get that actually up to the correct numbers before we can even consider having that discussion with that board. So the best thing to do is to keep looking at the township website, as well as if you have anything in between Dennis, First Line, or me, as well as the clerk for just general questions. So I cannot thank everybody enough for attending, for being in this hot, stuffy room for as long as you were before Christmas. I really appreciate this.